History isn't what you've been told. It's a ritual, a contract, a pledge. From the temples of Osiris to the marble halls of Washington, an ancient death cult has bound the living to the realm of the dead through law, symbol, and deception. In 1933, under cover of economic crisis, they mortgaged the estates of the people, sealing us into a trust indenture as chattel. But this story begins far earlier, long before America, in the shadows of Egypt and Babylon. The myth of Osiris is more than a story. It is the blueprint for a legal system. Osiris, murdered by his brother Set, is dismembered into 14 pieces. His phallus, symbolizing life and the authority to make law, is lost to a crocodile. Isis fashions an artificial one, resurrecting him to rule not the living, but the dead. From this point forward, Osiris is judge of souls in the underworld. This myth encodes a system, artificial authority over a dead realm. In law, a mortgage from the Norman Moor, dead, and gage, pledge, is precisely that. A transfer of title until a debt is paid, rendering the property dead to its owner. An undertaking is a solemn legal promise to perform. An undertaker manages the dead. When you grasp these definitions, you see the pattern. Every mortgage, every pledge, is an initiation into the legal underworld. 13 colonies, 13 found pieces of Osiris. But the 14th? That would be Washington, D.C., the artificial phallus, the seat of fabricated authority. Look at the symbols. The obelisk, Osiris missing member, within a vesica piscis, Isis part, before the capital basilica, the womb, where the so-called lawmakers are imbued with dead law authority. Unlike monarchies, where sovereignty was locked under kings, America's sovereignty lay in the people, making them ripe for usurpation by merchants and bankers. Through contracts, trusts, and pledges, sovereignty could be stolen without a single shot fired. The crash of 1929 was the pretext. In 1933, under the Emergency Banking Act, all estates of the American people were pledged as collateral for the national debt. This was the dead pledge, defined in Bouvier's Law Dictionary as damnification, the mortgage of a nation. The Testuy Cavie Act of 1666 already presumed the absent and lost to be dead, their estates managed by trustees. Now, every American was presumed civilly dead, converted into a legal fiction. Judges in black robes, priests of Osiris, preside with the gavel, Osiris's missing scepter of authority, summoning the dead to judgment. The merchants had done it. Lawful money removed, the people locked into an artificial trust, every transaction mediated by negotiable instruments born of this mortgage system. In Washington, D.C., the Washington Monument mirrors London's Cleopatra's Needle and the Vatican's obelisk. 3 centers of power, commerce, law, religion, aligned in a triad of dominion. They are declarations of ownership over the dead realm, over the trust, over you. They hide behind the most sacred principle, free will. As Christ said in Matthew 16:19, "Whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven." Tacit consent is their shield. If you do not object, they claim you agreed. In their view, they have done nothing wrong. You stepped into the underworld willingly, one signature at a time. Learn more by searching Burn the Corporate Fiction on YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook.
Yep, screw X. They shadow ban me. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Burn the Corporate Fiction. Tonight we're going to be getting into the esoteric aspect of this Saturnian death cult, ancient Babylonian money magic that has enslaved the entire world in a trust indenture. Because, as I say all the time, man cannot make law. Okay, they can only regulate property and commerce. Nothing could be more true. So, what do? They engage in what they call an undertaking, quite literally, right? Or being an undertaker, rather, making you responsible for the undertaking that they place on you. And that is literally what it is. An undertaking, as we'll go through tonight, is basically to be responsible for the performance of an obligation, generally a one-sided pledge. It's the ancient system of pledging. In fact, I think that might be where we start today. I'm going to look up that Colonel Mendel House. I just thought it, just inspired with this, so I It's the only reason I don't have it prepared already. But as I do that, let me say hi to those of you in the chat. We've got Mojo Shop. Good to see you, brother. John O'Foz. Good to see you. Ryan. And yeah, that's everyone who's talking right now. So I'm sure more people will engage in the chat later. But to the rest of you, good evening. So let's see here. We're going to have to go to Yandex, of course, right? Because you're not going to find that Edward Mendel House quote on any Google-based search engine, that's for sure. House quotes. Pull this up real quick. All right. Yeah, excellent. So let me share this with you guys. And of course, the link is pinned in the chat, so you're more than welcome to come up and contribute to the conversation if you would like, or to offer an opposing point of view, which I welcome, and or just hang out. All right. So Edward Mendel House, who is the senior advisor to Woodrow Wilson, he said, very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. That's important. That's what I want to bring up. It is ancient. It was all the way back to ancient Egypt. This is how they were able to reduce people to property. Okay, literally by getting people to mortgage their estates, which is your personality, labor, and property. In fact, I'm going to show you a Bouvier's Law Dictionary definition of estate. That's actually, there's like 40 something definitions, but the substantive definition is your personality, labor, and property, to sum it up. He says it in a more lawyerly way, but that's what it is. It is your choice of property, your ability to use your free will to choose and acquire it, labor towards acquiring it, and then the actual possession and disposing of it is what comprises your estate. So when fiduciary foundations of administrative law review, right, or just congressional record outright tells you that Congress and president acted as proxy settlers to mortgage your estate, that's what that means. They mortgaged everything that makes you you, as far as your personality, labor, and property, and your ability to hold and enjoy the property, dispose of it as you would wish to, or to leave it to your heirs. It's pretty dark, and this goes back to an ancient system. Why? Because I personally believe, and I'm not a Bible thumper, but I personally believe that this is biblical. It is 100% biblical. This is Satan's counterfeit kingdom, because man cannot make law. So they figured out how to circumvent the law by using free will, which necessarily is man's ability to enter into pledges, oaths, contracts, and agreements. And they use that to encumber one with obligations, essentially say absolute obligation to perform like a trust indenture, to just all of your labor, all of your property until the debt is paid, and then make the debt unpayable. You perpetually reduce these people to property, and then you can make law regulating them. It is Satan's counterfeit kingdom. There's no other explanation. And it literally does go all the way back to Egypt. So as Mendel House says, he says, very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. Now, what's interesting about pledging, if you look up the word pledging in Bouvier's Law Dictionary or any old law dictionary, it'll tell you that it is a one-sided contract. Essentially, it's a one-sided covenant where you basically pledge your fealty, your whatever, pledge your labor, your property, your estate to someone, and they do not have to offer necessarily anything in return. That's what pledging is. It's one-sided. So by such method, such as pledging homage to a king or an emperor, right? So by such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency, right? So let me translate that, okay? Compel people to submit to our agenda by reducing them to property and being able to regulate them. Remember, he said register their biological property. And what he means is yourself, your body, and your children, right? And then now, since you are property under them, they can compel you to submit to the agenda, which will affect their security as a chargeback for the fiat paper currency, talking about subjecting you to administrative regulations under the trust indenture, motor vehicle code, property taxes, income taxes. We got Mr. Tahiti in the house. Good to see you, Mr. Tahiti. He says, I think knowing the truth is better than living in playtime. So do I. So do I, man. So by subjecting you to these regulations, which can be used to generate revenue, feeing you for the use of property and feeing you for the use of misuse of the property under revenue codes, they can then affect those obligations as a chargeback. It affects the security that they're going to use, the trust that they're going to borrow against in the first place, that represents your future sweat equity and revenue from your property. And they can use that as the chargeback for the bankers to issue fiat paper currency. These people literally think it's the only logical way to fund government. Well, if that's the case, then I say fuck government. You don't need one, right? If you've got to indenture the people in order to logically fund a government, right, by placing a few oligarchs who are obviously PDF files and do a bunch of other stuff in charge of you, right? Where's that client list at? And in order to logically fund that, you must be indentured to it. Hell no. Okay. Every American will be forced to register or suffer not being able to work, earn a living. They will be chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever. This was written before the bankruptcy, or this was said before the bankruptcy. Security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, there be your birth certificate, right, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation secured by their pledges, which you didn't make. You didn't make that pledge. Congress made it for you, and the president made it for you because you are already under their administration as a 14th Amendment citizen. So that being said, let's see, did I actually share the window? No, I didn't. Like a dummy, shared the dang screen. Bear with me for 2 seconds. Window, boom. Okay. All right, let's jump over here. Bouvier's Law Dictionary, just so I can show you guys. So estate. Let's see if we can zoom in for you. It's very important to understand. I say this all the time, okay? Of course, to do that, it would jump up like 17 words. That's dumb. Okay, estate. So it says this word has several meanings. Most extensive sense, it is applied to signify everything which riches or fortune may consist and includes personal and real property. Hence, we say personal estate, real estate, right? But in truth, if you read like Bouvier's Black's Law definition of estate, or just you take the substance of every definition of estate together, it is your personality, property, and labor, as J.G. Warner says in a treatise on the American Law of Administration. It is your personality, labor, and property, okay? And that's why down here in the second definition, he says in Latin, it is called status. Now, what are we always talking? What is everybody who talks about the law, right? Who's trying to teach people the truth? They tell you want to correct your status, right? Well, in Latin, the estate is called status because it signifies the condition or circumstances in which the owner stands with regard to his property, which determines whether or not you're under law, common law, or you're under some other form of administrative regulation that they call law. And that all depends on your relationship to your estate. That determines your status, your status. That's why I say all the time. So when you have absolute allodial property rights, okay, when you have absolute right to your property, then you are under common law. You have lawful right to the property that you can enforce. If you have been mortgaged, a dead pledge, your property is dead to you, including your labor. Everything is dead to you because creditors have the first claim to it. And when I say dead, it's not a metaphor. They literally look at you as if you are dead. It's called civiliter mortis. I'll give you an example. Civiliter mortis. The bankrupt became, as it were, for many purposes, civiliter mortis. Civiliter mortis means civilly dead. It means as far as the law is concerned, you have no voice at law. You cannot represent yourself. You cannot operate at law whatsoever. You literally have to have an attorney or somebody to speak for you because you're dead. You're dead. And that's really how they look at it. And that's why the judge wears a black robe and he bangs the gavel, which is the phallus of Osiris, representing that artificial authority. So before we go too much further, let's lay the groundwork and go ahead and look at the legend of Osiris, shall we? So I see we have Theo Shen showed up. Good to see you, man. Let's see if I missed anybody else while I was over here yapping. Oh, Theo. All right. So this is the myth, and I want you guys to bear with me through the boring part because I'm going to relate it directly to the Christian in this country. How this has been a long-standing plan to finalize what they did in Egypt, what they did in Babylon, what they did in Rome, what they started in London, and what they intended to finish here was to permanently usurp divine authority, divine jurisdiction, and bring everybody into the artificial realm of the dead. That's what this legend is going to represent, okay? And I'm going to explain it. So it says Osiris was slain or drowned by Seth, his brother, who's the evil dark god, okay, who tore the corpse into 14 pieces and flung them over Egypt, okay. Eventually, Isis and her sister, Nefertiti's, found and buried all pieces except the phallus, thereby giving new life to Osiris. Well, that's not this is Britannica. So what the actual truth of this, because that is definitely a sanitized version of the story. Let's see if this one, yeah, changing seasons and cycles. Thought that one was going to be good, but hopefully this one will be a little better for you guys. Yeah, and you thought he wore a black and white robe because he's like the referee. No, he wears just a black robe because he's a priest of Osiris, is essentially what he is. And I'll get to that because the courtroom is a temple itself. Okay, so tonight we're getting a little esoteric. If you just like the law stuff, you might want to skip to the next stream because this one we're getting into it. And this is what's going on. So in my opinion, all right, in ancient Egypt, the story of Osiris, this is why you have the client list. This is why the client list hasn't been released. You want to know why the client list hasn't been released? If you look at Little St. James Island, what is on St. James Island? A pharaonic temple, a pharaoh temple, right? An Egyptian temple, because this goes back to the god of death, right? And why do you think they had boats and all these elite people going down there and hanging out and partying there? Well, I'll tell you why. Because this is where they traded in their spiritual currency, right? The dark side. This is the entirety of the world's elite for the most part. If you're in the billionaire club, you're a part of this, or you're not allowed to be in the billionaire club. You're not allowed to continue your existence. So that's why that list will never come out, because this is the foundation. This is the lifeblood of their governmental and banking system, is this pact they've made with death, with literally Saturn, right? The Grim Reaper, Osiris is Saturn, same character. Kronos, the devourer of children. That's weird, right? So that's why they're going down there to that little island. We got Peg's Place. Good to see you. Mad Max says you got it here right on time. Yeah, so let's see if this one's honest. And if it's not, I'm going to tell you the actual story, which you can find yourself. It's because it's a little bit more graphic than what the Encyclopedia Britannica was telling us. But it's central to the story because the main central point of the story is, and it's going to sound gross, but it's the phallus of Osiris. It represents the artificial authority. It represents artificial divine authority is what the obelisk represents, okay? And the womb of Isis represents the material world, okay? I'm going to show you how they've laid this all out and how it fits with exactly what they've done. So, in ancient Egypt, the story of Osiris. Osiris is a powerful deity who embodies the natural world's vitality and promise of new life, resurrection, right? His story involves themes of betrayal, blah, blah, blah. Let's get into it. So, Osiris, the god of the underworld, was one of the most important gods in the ancient Egyptian pantheon. He was often depicted as a green-skinned god, crowned with a feather representing the power of rebirth and regeneration. He was considered the divine king, the ruler who brought peace and prosperity to Egypt. Okay, he was known for his wisdom and justice. He taught the Egyptians how to farm, cultivate the land, and live in harmony with nature. He was also believed to be the god of the dead, and in his realm, the underworld was a place where the souls of the dead went after they passed to be judged. The Egyptians believed that judgment was awaiting them in the underworld, and Osiris would weigh their hearts against a feather to determine their fate. Now, we're just going to cut over for 1 second. I want to show you guys something. Weigh their hearts against a feather. Now, remember, Osiris is the god of the dead, Saturn. Okay, Saturn is also the Grim Reaper, Father Time, Kronos, the devourer of children, the Saturn, Satan type of situation, right? So check this out. We'll go to the IRS logo. Now, look that up real quick. And as it pops up here, let's find a nice big one. Okay, we'll do that one. Why not? Okay, can you guys see that real well? Now, that looks, I never see anything other than what it actually is, but you may see an eagle holding scales with a feather on it, when in fact, this is a shadowy robed Grim Reaper with one arm holding scales weighing you against a feather. That's IRS in this trust indenture system, because they've undertaken you into a mortgage like an undertaker, okay? And now you're in the realm of the dead. You're a legal fiction, a dead thing at law, okay? So you have to be adjudicated in equity, where the judge gets to be God. He's Osiris, and they're showing you right in the IRS symbol. Right in the IRS symbol. Bam. It's right there, okay? So, all right, let's go back to the legend here. That's right here. So, yeah, no, we don't want best walking shoes. All right, so it tells you, it says that Osiris, the god of the underworld, where is it at? Where it said he was, there it is. Okay, so it says that the Egyptians believed the judgment was awaiting them in the underworld, and Osiris would weigh their hearts against a feather to determine their fate, just like this logo right here. That's exactly what that is. You'll never see an eagle again, because that's specific. I mean, what is the point of the one feather, right? Well, now we know. It's actually Osiris here in this robe weighing you against a feather. Okay, I'm done with that for a second. All right. So a light heart would mean passage into the afterlife, but a heavy heart filled with evil deeds, debt, right, would be devoured by the demon Ammit. Okay, so now we got to go to the betrayal of Set, because this goes to the founding of the country. And all of this is one big euphemism for how to bring people into the underworld to allow man to become god of the dead, basically. Because man can't rule living beings, cannot make law, can only make rules and regulations regarding property and commerce. That's it. Property under administration, specifically, not another living man or woman's property, just property under administration. Okay, so Osiris's brother, Set, was a god of chaos and destruction. Envious of Osiris's power and popularity, he plotted to kill him. Set's jealousy and desire and power would lead to a horrific act that shook the very foundation of the universe. So, Set, driven by malevolent intentions, tricked Osiris into entering a beautifully crafted chest. Once Osiris was inside, Set slammed the lid shut and threw it into the Nile River. Right? So, the vile act, fueled by jealousy and fueled by a thirst for power, set in motion a chain of events that would have dire consequences for the world. The chest carrying Osiris floated down the Nile until it was washed ashore in Byblos. The queen of Byblos, unaware of the contents, found the chest and, enchanted by its beauty, used it as a pillar for her palace. When Osiris's wife Isis learned of her husband's fate, she went in search for him. Eventually, she found the chest in Byblos, and with the help of Thoth, which is the scribe god of wisdom, like lawmaker, right? The scribe god, managed to free her husband's body, right? Artificially. It's all going to tie in. However, Set, in his continued rage against Osiris, found the body and in a fit of fury dismembered it into 14 pieces. Now, this is where you get the Illuminati 13. And it's going to make sense in a second. He scattered the pieces across Egypt, attempting to ensure that Osiris would never be resurrected and that his power and influence would be forever extinguished. Isis, heartbroken and determined to bring her husband back to life, embarked on a perilous journey to find his scattered body parts. She searched tirelessly throughout Egypt, eventually finding all 14 pieces with the help of Anubis, the god of mummification. Isis used her divine powers to breathe life back into Osiris, but he remained a spirit, unable to return to the land of the living. Despite this, Osiris, so this is still not the correct story. So what the actual story is, and they keep particularly leaving it out, like this one mentioned how they couldn't find the phallus in the Britannica, right? So she just fashioned a new one. But the actual truth is this. So the legend goes, obviously Osiris was jealous of Set. And it's funny that they obfuscate that, because that's the actual official legend of it. But anyway, so Set was jealous of Osiris, drowned him, cut his body up into 14 pieces so he couldn't be resurrected, and then scattered them across Egypt. Isis, distraught, came down from the heavens with her sister and could only find 13 of them. The missing piece was his phallus, okay, which Set had fed to a crocodile to ensure that he could not be resurrected, to make sure he couldn't be resurrected. So Isis fashioned a new one, and then impregnated herself, resurrected Osiris partially, and he became the god of the underworld. And then she impregnated herself with it and gave birth to Horus, which was the resurrected Osiris under this new age system. Okay, now let's look at DC. So there were 13 colonies that became 13 states. And then let's see, Washington Monument. And then I'll continue this, it'll be better. And I'll look at some images and see if I can find an overview image, an overhead image. I'm sure there's got to be one somewhere, right? There it is. Okay. Now, this right here, this obelisk, and the reason that there's one in DC and the City of London, there's two of them, and it's called Cleopatra's Needle. And again, that represents the two currents of light and darkness, right? So it's called Cleopatra's Needle. And then there's one in Rome, right in the center, right in the middle of a sundial. Okay, but this one in particular is of consequence because it sits right in front of the Capitol building, which is a basilica where all the lawmakers are, right? The quote unquote lawmakers. And now look at where this obelisk is sitting. It's sitting in the middle of a MasterCard logo, but that MasterCard logo is actually a vesica piscis. And in the center, it represents the female reproductive organ. Okay, now when you look at what each of these mythological figures represent, Osiris represents the god of rebirth and resurrection, but also the god of the underworld due to being killed by Set and only partially resurrected as kind of like a grim reaper, right? In his new phallus, so prior he had the divine authority to make law and he was just and fair, but afterwards he only has this artificial power. And this is an analogy for when you have the two pillars, the dark pillar and the light pillar in Kabbalah. One represents strength and one represents the line of kings and one represents the line of priests. The dark one represents the line of kings. The white one represents the line of priests. Okay, so one's temporal power, the other one's spiritual power. And the priest line has not been reestablished since Christ's death. Okay, he was the only one who had divine authority to know the law, to speak the law, right? To basically decree the law, right? Because he's God incarnate. And they all know this, these satanic people. They know this stuff, right? So this is the artificial authority right here. This is an artificial phallus. And what it represents is like, well, think about the word authority, author, the ability to write into existence, like God. In the beginning, there was the word. He's the one with authority, right? Well, this is artificial authority. It's a usurpation, right? And it's sitting in the middle of Isis's reproductive organ, right? To symbolize this artificial authority impregnating society in front of the womb, which shows the product of the two uniting, which is the Capitol building filled with those scumbag, quote unquote, lawmakers, legislators, who now have this dead hand authority because everybody's been mortgaged to regulate them as property. This is what's going on. It represents the artificial authority. Okay. So it's actually a blueprint for an ancient system of governance that goes all the way back to the first civilizations of man's attempt to dethrone God. When we get to the Tower of Babel, right, it's the same concept. And it all comes from the fact that man cannot create law, can only regulate property. So now what's even more clever than this, right, is the way that they've learned to do it and avoid any kind of wrathful repercussions is they've learned to not violate your free will by getting you to consent and contract into it, by offering you benefits and then making you dependent. Look at this artificial womb of society that they've created today that leaves you absolutely dependent upon the corporate state for your every need. You have running water, right? You have indoor plumbing, you have grocery stores, you don't have to hunt, you don't have to find a creek. You've got you don't need any skills. You can go to these corporate consumer, these low skill corporate jobs making consumer goods that nobody needs and shouldn't buy, and it just ends up in the trash anyways, right? You don't need any skills. You can just go work for them using your social security number. You have everything taken care of for you. You don't have to be independent, subsist on your own, right? There's all sorts of, you fall on hard times, you can go get welfare, you can go get all this, right? But in exchange, you are property. You are chattel property of the federal corporation, as we talk about all the time on this channel via the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment itself offering the privileges and immunities. So I offer that this was the intention the entire time. You have 13 colonies, right, that became 13 states. And then you have 13 colonies that became 13 states. Let me say hi to a couple guys that showed up. We got Corbett showed up. Good to see you. And I thought I saw one other new individual. No. That's cool. Anyway, so 13 states, and then that represents the 13 body parts of Osiris, right? With the 14th, the actual ability to have authority, right, over other men, the ability to make law, missing because it has not been reestablished since Christ. And it will not be reestablished actually until Christ returns. That's what it is, right? So what do? These Satanists, they erected their artificial, like ISIS, and that's why they did it right between Virginia and Maryland. Virgin Mary, that's where this thing sits right here. Sits right there in the middle of Virgin Mary. This big old fake dick that I'm showing you on the screen right now. Excuse my crudeness, but that's what it is. It's absolutely what it is. Okay. And they put it right in the center of Virgin Mary, literally. And then right in the center, because ISIS, right, or Virgin Mary, the Catholic Church, worships as a way to worship ISIS because it's still the same Egyptian cult. Why do you think that the Vatican has a sundial in the center? Hey, Rick, good to see you, man. I'm glad you made it. Why do you think the Vatican has a sundial, an Egyptian sundial in the center, and then the obelisk right in the middle of the Egyptian sundial? Because that represents Osiris. That represents the divine authority to rule. And it's different than this one because the one in the Vatican represents the authority to make the law. This one represents the impregnation of the world with that authority to extend the Vatican's authority to every other nation in the world, which they have done through the banking system and the securities scheme by using the legal blueprint that is in the legend of Osiris. Okay? These are not coincidences. This is literally why they're there. Now let's go forward. So we know that Congress, well, let me stay on topic with the original. So the only way to actually make this scheme happen, okay, once this republic was created, the people were sovereign. Okay. And as always, I prove everything. So we'll go to Chisholm v. Georgia real quick. And I know you guys are probably tired of seeing it, but here, it's right here. At the revolution, the sovereignty devolved upon the people. And they are truly the sovereigns of this country, but they are sovereigns without subjects, unless African slaves among us may be so called, and have none to govern but themselves. The citizens of America are equal as fellow citizens and joint tenants in the sovereignty. Okay. And then it tells you down here that, let's see. Governors are the agents of the people and at most stand in the same relation to their sovereigns in which regents in Europe stand to their sovereigns, meaning they're beneath us individually. That's what a constitutional republic is. No democratic process in this country should ever affect your private property rights. When you're in the private, you are unaffected by the public law and public policy. It does not affect you. Okay? We can prove that. That's why private express trusts are protected, because it creates a private vessel under common law that comes before and stands above any ex post facto laws of the state that would impair the obligations of that common law contract. But we're not getting into that tonight, right? The point is that you can be in the private here and nothing the government does can affect you. It will only affect you when you go into the public. But when you're a 14th Amendment citizen, you are always public chattel, always public property. You are an agent of the public, of the United States. You are an agent of the principal bankrupt corporation known as the United States. You are stuck as a trustee in the public at all times, which is why they pretend that you have constitutional rights. But the only thing in the Constitution that applies to you is the 14th Amendment. Okay. And that's why they can abridge those rights. Right. I've even heard a judge say to a guy in court on one of these videos I was watching, he said, I don't want to hear anything more about the Constitution because it does not apply here to you. It does not apply to you. And it doesn't. Because only the 14th Amendment does. You have become public chattel property, and only things that apply to you are the administrative regulations, statutes, and codes that have been issued to regulate you as property. So you see, this is why they did this. They create, so everybody's like, oh, this is so special. They gave us our sovereignty. First time in history, people became sovereign. That is true. But there's a reason that James Madison, when he was asked, what kind of government is it that you've given us? He said, a republic, if you can keep it, which to me has always sounded like a damn challenge. And it turns out it is, because James Madison was very much against the common people having any kind of power. And his diaries, released like some 60 years after the Constitutional Convention, you find out that the whole reason they scrapped the original Articles of Confederation and drafted the Constitution was because they didn't want the common man to have power. They wanted to be able to centralize the power and bring the states under the federal government, which coincidentally, this case actually did that, while at the same time as affirming our sovereignty and our position as the sovereign of the nation. It also made the states started to make the states subject to the federal corporation. So, okay, Daniel, I can do that. Well, actually, it stays on X, brother. It stays on X. So it'll be on my page on X. But good to have you. So anyways, so you see that we were sovereign. Now, the reason that these dastardly Satanists had to do this shit was because prior to this, all the merchants and bankers, all the oligarchs, what we would call the captains of industry of that time, the ones who started the Virginia Company and the Hudson Bay Company and all the companies that eventually became the national governments we now know as the United States and Canada, etc., right? The very basic framework for the corporate oligarchy we have now, commercial extensions of the Crown Corporation of London. Well, the very reason that they did this was because those captains of industry were stuck under the crowns and the papacy. And no matter how rich they got or how much power they acquired, they could not mortgage, they could not bring the king under mortgage. They could not bring the Pope under mortgage. Okay. In fact, the kings and the Pope, like the monarchs and the Pope, were forbidden from entering into any trust relationship where they are the subject, because it's impossible. It doesn't fit with their framework of government. You cannot bring this and make this person a usufruct and a trustee because he's the sovereign of the nation, or in the Pope's case, the sovereign of the whole world under unum sanctum, right? So they got this clever idea. They called it the Great Experiment in Self-Governance, knowing that people are inclined to be lazy. As Thomas Jefferson said, the natural order of things is for liberty to yield and for governments to gain power. And they knew this. That is the natural order of things, because people are genuinely, when times are good, you've heard the saying, like, hard times make strong men make good times make weak men, and then weak men make hard times. It keeps going in that cycle for a reason, because when people are complacent and things are comfortable, which they know this and they use it against you. That's why you have an artificial womb right now of grocery stores and all that. And I'll get to that in a second, because the corporations don't need you anymore. Have you noticed the degrading level of quote unquote customer service at your department stores and all that stuff? Is because they don't need you anymore. They don't give a fuck if you buy their stuff or not. They know that you need them, and without them, you would die. You can't hunt. You can't fish. I'm not saying to my subs, I'm sure a lot of you can, but most people can't hunt, can't fish, couldn't find fresh water to save their life, right? Couldn't build a house, have no skilled trades to speak of whatsoever, okay? entirely dependent on the corporation. So anyways, knowing that people become complacent, will stop learning the law, will lose their will to fight, will lose their will to resist, as long as they're kept just comfortable enough, as Juvenal said, give them bread and circuses and the people will never revolt, right? Good to have you, Raj. Glad you showed up, man. Give the people bread and circuses and they'll never revolt. And they know this, okay? So as long as they can keep you just comfortable enough, you're going to forget the law. You're going to forget what this country was really supposed to be with you as the sovereign and all that stuff. And then they are going to use their superior knowledge of law and business to trick you into both implied and expressed trust relationships, where you now become a legal fiction and property. This was their intention. And they always intended on centralizing the power in District of Columbia. Okay? So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Michael Sarian, and I disagree with some of the stuff that he says, but I did bring up one document that was hard to find for me anyways. I don't know if you guys have, but it's called the Constitutional Con. Let's see, where did I pull this sucker up at? Well, there it is. Let me finish saying what I was saying, though. The reason that they did that is so they could usurp the sovereignty of the people. Now, since the sovereigns, like it says in Chisholm v. Georgia, were co-equal with all of the other sovereigns in the world, all the crowns and the Pope, right? The Pope couldn't come to the United States, any one of the United States, and tell somebody what to do. And neither could any king or queen or anybody. So the people of this country were co-equal with the sovereigns around the world. That's what the bankers, these merchants, these ancient Babylonian, Egyptian, Babylonian death cult people needed, so they could usurp that sovereignty for themselves. And now that they've taken that for themselves and through the 14th Amendment have been able to give it to their corporations to a certain degree as well, they now have these massive conglomerations, monopolistic corporate entities that are actually more wealthy than any single nation or crown or anybody. Like take BlackRock, for instance. BlackRock would never be able to exist and do what it does if it wasn't for them making us sovereign. They had to make us sovereign to usurp our sovereignty via mortgage contract. And the way that they did that was the ancient way that they've always done it in Egypt and Babylon and Rome. And they did it via, well, first, by creating a trust position of citizenship. See, the ordinary one of the people of Michigan, say, or Virginia, were above the government, like I've said ad nauseum. I'm not going to go into that anymore. But the 14th, and it's because the people created the states. The state, in fact, is just the estates that comprise it, the families, the houses that compose it. And the only reason the state was sovereign was because the people in the houses under it were sovereign. Okay. And so the people created the states, and then the states got together. And at first we had the Articles of Confederation, which we're actually going to talk about with this Michael Sarian document. The Articles of Confederation was impenetrable. You could recall representatives within the same year they were elected. You didn't have to wait for term limits or none of that shit. If they weren't doing exactly what you wanted to do, you could recall them, fire them, and send somebody else in their stead. And also, it was considered a league of sovereign independent nations. That's what a confederacy is, was a league of sovereign independent nations that retain their independence. Penhallow versus Stone's Administrator, 1795. They said that when a union is confederate and not corporate, the sovereignty resides within the state, and the state retains all powers which she did not expressly give to the federal government, right? I'll show you guys something crazy right now, actually, before we even get into this. Look, this is Revised Statutes of the State of Michigan, 1836, if it ever loads, which it will. They probably don't want. They don't like me showing this stuff. So anyways, hate thee trust. It's all digitally scanned in there. And this is from the appendix, okay? And now this is from right after Michigan was accepted into the Union, okay? And I want to show you something. This is their acceptance. Michigan wrote this, okay? This is their acceptance. And it tells you that, and as the interest and prosperity, let's see if I can zoom in for you guys real quick so you guys can really see it. I want you to see that this is the truth. This is the truth. They lied to you in school about what the Civil War was about. They told you it was about slavery and that the Confederates were the Southerners. No, every state's Confederate. Look, so as the interest and prosperity of the state will be greatly advanced by an immediate admission into the union as one of its sovereignties, and as the people of the said state are solicitous to give to her sister states and to the world unequivocal proof of her desire to promote the tranquility and harmony of the confederacy. Confederacy, right there. It's 1836. 1836, I'm pretty sure. Or it's 1846. It's one of the two. Hold on. Let me see if it says it. It's 1836 or 1846. One of the two. I can't remember because I got a bunch of different statutes or revised statutes opened up from all through the 1800s and early 1900s. But it's early. It's right when you can see that this is their acceptance into statehood. Okay. And they say it right there. Desire to promote the tranquility, right? The tranquility and harmony of the confederacy, because every state's confederate, because the sovereignty is within the states. Okay. So the people created the states. Then the states created the federal government under the Articles of Confederation. And that federal government was very limited in scope and power. And then even under the Constitution, as you can see here, where we're still a confederacy, even after the Constitution, decades and decades after the Constitution, still a confederacy. Okay. Because the states created that federal creature. That's what it was, a creation, a creature. And the creation is always subject to the creator. Right? Unless something happens like a state of dependency, right? So here's what happened. People created the states created the federal government, then the federal government decided to make its own creation. Okay? And that creation is called the 14th Amendment Citizen. And here you'll see it says it became part of the organic law July 28, 1868, and its importance entitles it to special mention. It creates, or at least recognizes for the first time, a citizenship of the United States as distinct from that of the states. Now, this was very, very distinct because this citizenship was a trust, a creature of the federal corporation. This was the same type of citizenship as Roman citizenship, where they offer you benefits, privileges, and immunities in exchange for the ability to tax and administer your estate. It's the same shit. This opened the door for Roman civil law right here to usurp common law, as Blackstone talks about throughout the entirety of his commentaries on the encroachment of foreign. If you read the Declaration of Independence, this exact same type of shit is why we fought England in the first place, as far as the common people were concerned. I think it was a big ruse to ultimately allow the oligarchs to usurp the sovereignty of the people and be on par with the kings and the Pope, right? But in the Declaration of Independence, one of the reasons cited for going against King George was subjecting the people of the colonies to a foreign jurisdiction. That would be this Roman civil law, where it's this type of citizenship, completely different than the type of citizenship we, the people, had as the grantors of the government trust. Okay, the federal corporation is now the creator of this trust. And when you adopt it, you automatically adopt the persona of something they created, and now they administer and control you, which is why the fourth provision of the 14th Amendment tells you the validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned. Shall not be questioned. Yeah, that's because they planned on using this citizenship class as capital stock to borrow against. Right? Capital, caput, per head, capita, right? Capital stock, agricultural stock to borrow against from these third-party banking cartels. And this was absolutely imperative to set this up. That's why it had to happen. It was absolutely imperative to set this up, to centralize the borrowing power, and then be able to collateralize the citizenry en masse. And the only way you could do that is by having a centralized citizenship as well. Instead of having the citizens of each of the several states, you have just the one citizenship, right? The United States citizenship, which centralizes the borrowing power and centralizes the collateral. Now they could effectively introduce their central banking system. And they have to have the central bank because you have to have somebody to, a third party, to be able to mortgage the estates of the citizenry against, or mortgage against the estates of the citizenry, right? You had to have that. That's the only way you could create the indenture. And the indenture is the only way man can create law and control the behavior and property of other people. That's it. That's the only way, because man cannot create law. It can only regulate property and can only regulate commerce and property of incompetents and infants, right? And intestates. Intestate means dying without a will. They set this up with a triple trifecta of presumption, where they presume you to be all three, both missing, presumed dead, also as the 14th Amendment trustee, an infant and chattel property of your own estate. Title I, Section 8 declares everyone infants. The words person, individual, and human being, any used in any act of Congress, means an infant member of the species Homo sapien at any stage of development. That means you're an infant, and because infants can't hold title, right? So to further solidify that this is how they did it, before we get to the constitutional con, just for the new viewers, we've got some a higher crowd than we've had the last couple times, so I want to make sure everybody's up to speed before we get into that. So right here, this is McDonald v. State from 1890 or 1883. I apologize. That's 90, Supreme Court of Indiana, 320. Okay, so you go down here, and it tells you basically the simple story behind this is that this guy was charged with the crime. Okay, or he was indicted for a crime, and he got found guilty, and he appealed the verdict of the jury, saying that one of the jurors was an alien because he had moved from Germany but did not naturalize as a United States citizen. And they overturned it because they said the juror's name was Bushing. They said the evidence of Bushing on his voir dire, which is what they use to see if a juror is competent to be a juror, showed that although he was not a citizen of the United States, he was a citizen and voter of the state. Under Section 2 of Article 2 of our state constitution, one may be a citizen of a state and yet not a citizen of the United States. That's blanket for all the states. That's not just Indiana, all of them. One may be a citizen of the state and yet not a citizen of the United States. So you don't want to be a citizen of the United States, because the citizen of the United States is an indentured infant. You get privileges, immunities, benefits, and protection in exchange for being administered and being used as capital stock and not being able to question the public debt, as the fourth section of the 14th Amendment says. So I have another case for you as well. We have Cruden v. Neal. Or wait, I'm sorry, United States v. Cruikshank. Okay? So United States, it says, there is in our political system, and this is right after the 14th Amendment, 1875, okay? Says there is in our political system a government of each of the several states and a government of the United States as distinct and separate entities, all of them. Each is, well, there he says it right after that, each is distinct from the others and has citizens of its own who owe it allegiance and whose rights within its jurisdiction it must protect. The same person may be at the same time a citizen of the United States and a citizen of the states, but his rights of citizenship under one of those governments will be different from those he has under the other. And that can be more true, because you have common law rights as one of we the people, but when you're a United States citizen, you only have the right of use and to perform the obligations that are placed on the trust, whether it be by a bank pretending to be a court, issuing tickets or probation or whatever bonds that place obligations and place you under another indenture, or whether it just be those obligations that are placed on you by the original trust indenture of the mortgage of your property rights in 1933, which we have right here. So March 9th, 1933, page 83, second paragraph on the left-hand side. Now, forgive me because it highlights both columns, but we're only focusing on the left-hand column of the divider. And it says, the money, this is right after that, this is in the Emergency Banking Act, when they stole everybody's gold, and then we're figuring out how to collateralize the new currency, which would just be debt notes and not actual money per the Constitution, but just negotiable instruments, debt securities. And they tell you, they say the money, which is not what it is, but the money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it's backed by the credit of the nation. It will represent a mortgage on all homes and other property of all people in the nation. They mortgaged your estate. Okay, now we'll go back to Bouvier for a second for people who's just joining us. Your estate is is your labor, your personality, and your property, substantively, without reading all that stuff. And here, right in the very second definition in Bouvier's Law Dictionary adapted to the Constitution of the United States from 1856, it's common law. In Latin, it is called status because it signifies the condition or circumstances in which the owner stands with regard to his property. The law you are under, whether you're under the law of sovereigns, common law, the original law of this republic, or if you're under some administrative rule and regulation created by man, artificial authority, right? The death cult, because they've undertaken you, right? They've brought you into the world of artificial beings that killed you lawfully, right? Your relationship to your property determines what law you're under. If you have absolute ownership, you're sovereign. You have lawful rights that can be enforced at law, common law. If you are indentured, or if somebody has a superior interest in your estate and controlling interest, then you are not free, okay? And you only have equitable rights to your property. And that's all determined by your relationship to your property. It tells you right here, it's called, your estate in Latin is called status. That's where we get the word status. Oh, you need to correct your status. Not yet, exactly. You need to claim your estate. You need to change your relationship to your ability, your intangible property rights, your ability to own property. You need to claim it, because if you do not, then you are dead to the law, right? It's called status, and it's the condition or circumstances in which the owner stands with regard to his property. And all property regards law, and whether you're a slave or you're free is determined by your relationship to your property. So we'll jump back here. So when they mortgaged you, okay, they made you an indentured servant with only equitable rights to your property. And that's important to know, because equity is not law, and inequity, the judge's discretion, is God. He literally becomes Osiris sitting on the bench with the phallus of Osiris that he bangs on as the symbol of his authority. Again, that artificial phallus of Osiris every single time. And that's why, where was it that I had that? Oh, right here. Oh, there it is. Come on. Whoops. Fucker. Where'd that go? My bad. Well, I'll pull it back up. Images. And then we found this one was the best one that I seen to illustrate the point, where it actually has the picture of it within the middle of the vesica piscis. I thought, and there it is, right here. Has the picture of it within the middle of the vesica piscis. This represents the artificial authority of governing property. This is man's authority right here, the ability to govern property, and it represents reducing the world to property. And it's right in the middle of the reproductive organ of Isis, which is represented by the center of a MasterCard logo, also called the vesica piscis. And this sits right in front of the basilica, which is a womb representing the impregnation of that artificial dead hand power. Now, you've seen that Congress mortgaged your estates. So before we get to the Sarian document, we're going to take a look at that word, mortgage, for all of you who might be new to this. Okay? So the party who, yeah, we're not going to go through all that. So here's the thing. The lender in a mortgage was entitled not only to payments of interest, but to rents and profits of the real estate. And in your case, just the estate in general, all your property, any property they can generate revenue from. That's why all those administrative regulations created by man that are artificial, that's fictional, but it takes the color of law. If you are in the trust indenture, if you are a legal fiction as the trustee, okay, if you have taken on, putting that mask on, that persona of a 14th Amendment infant chattel property of your own estate, right, then they get the rents and profits of your estate, because that estate has been mortgaged to back this debt currency system, this fiat currency system, right? And look at the mockery. They call it fiat currency, right? Well, in Latin, when God says, let there be light, that is literally fiat lux, right? Fiat lux, let there be light. Well, they're mocking it. Fiat, let there be currency. Fiat currency, let there be currency. That's their satanic mockery of what they're doing and usurping divine authority, trying to make it permanent with AI. So anyway, this means as far as the borrower was concerned, the real estate was of no value, that is dead. until the debt was paid in full. Well, guess what? There is no payment due date on this mortgage. As long as there are Federal Reserve notes in circulation, you are mortgaged. And so here's the false hope, the false light of Lucifer thing they got going here with the Treasury dividend dollar and the sovereign wealth fund. It's called a Treasury-backed, asset-backed Treasury dividend dollar. There's that first term, asset-backed. Who do you think the asset is in this Egyptian, pharaonic, Saturnian death cult? The asset is you. You're going to still be mortgaged. You're still going to be administered as asset, right? You're securitized asset, collateral. You're still going to be managed like that. They're just going to change owners. They're going to get rid of the Federal Reserve and turn the states into their own little fiefdoms of administering infants. And then they're going to give you a snippet of it. It's called a asset-backed Treasury dividend dollar, because they're going to give you a snippet, that dividend, right? They're going to be like, oh, see, we're different than the Federal Reserve. We're better. Since we're using you as collateral, we're going to give you some of it. Isn't that nice of us? See, you're free people, you're sovereign. But when in reality, the gift of that dividend is actually just going to be the forerunner to the universal basic income, as artificial intelligence takes everyone's jobs and causes mass displacement. And this is the beginning of creating the track, trace, and monitor smart city, freedom city, whatever the hell you want to call it. It's still the same damn thing. It locks you into the legal fiction of which you are not. You are a living man or woman, the highest evidence of the divine law in existence, right? The highest manifestation of it. Okay. That's a fact. And they are trying to steal that from you and lock you into a dead entity, an ens legis, a creature of the law, fiction that they created. And they're going to integrate it with your body so that AI will, and then they're going to put AI governance in place so that AI only ever sees the trustee, the legal fiction, and you never have access to law again. They will have thereby successfully permanently usurped the divine authority of God and made themselves Osiris on Earth, or Saturn, or whatever you want to call it, right? So yeah, that's the situation with that. Now, let's hop over here to this Michael Sarian piece real quick, because this is a pretty cool document. Where did it go? Bear with me for a second. I just had it up. Is that it? There it is. All right, so this is interesting. What a lot of people don't realize, and it's another reason why I think this was the intention the entire time. Not only was there 13 colonies, just like the 13 found pieces of Osiris, and then the 14th being the artificial phallus, basically fashioned by the whore of Babylon, right, which is actually Isis, that they try to misrepresent as Mary in the Catholic Church, but as evidenced by the obelisk in the middle of the female reproductive organ in DC, that's located in between Virginia and Maryland, Virgin Mary, right? It's actually the whore of Babylon. And I'm not saying that Mary is. I'm saying that it's an artificial counterfeit, like everything else they do. It's counterfeit. It's 100% counterfeit, everything. And so that 14th piece, being the District of Columbia, is meant to be the artificial authority, think about this, the authority, right? Author, right? In the beginning, there was the word, right? And then, not to be gross, but you take like the male reproductive organ, and it's called a penis, right? And its pen is. So it represents a authority. And that's why they've been so obsessed with the fucking phallus for centuries, right? The millennia, I'm sorry, not centuries, millennia. They're obsessed with it because it represents authority. That's why the word testify, it's considered the fount of authority over life. It authors life, right? Whereas the woman gestates, builds the body, the temple. She's the temple. She's the womb. She's the what's the word I'm looking? The nurturing and building aspect of it. The seed of it comes from the man. And that's where they look at it like. So the phallus represents, and I'm not saying one way or another, I'm just telling you how they look at it. And so that phallus of Osiris represents authority, authority, right? Authority. And so, and just like the legend of Osiris, the only way they can get authority, right, is by pulling you undertaking you into a dead pledge, a mortgage, right, and making you a dead chattel property, making you dead chattel property, and then adjudicating you in quasi-rem, where the judge's discretion is the law. Okay, so two things actually before we get into this. So trust can only ever be adjudicated in equity. I'm not going to go into that, but look it up. Look it up about trust. Trust can only ever be dealt with in equity. Okay, and equity is not law. In fact, Bouvier had said, or I'm sorry, not Bouvier, Blackstone had said this about equity. He said, and on the other hand, liberty, the liberty of considering all cases in an equitable light, must not be indulged too far, lest we thereby destroy all law, because equity is the conscience of a judge. It is adjudicating fiction, which law cannot recognize. That's why equity exists, for the purpose of dealing with things that law cannot, by the very nature of being law, and only dealing with living things in the creation of God, and not dealing with fictional creations of men. Law cannot deal with it. And because it's dealing with the creations of men, men can actually judge it, adjudicate it. And that's the only reason a judge can act as God in that position, is because the things he's supposed to be deciding upon are supposed to be non-living things. It's supposed to be property. And therefore, it doesn't violate any divine law. But they weren't happy with that. These Inns of Court and these bar pirates, who are all satanic in nature, whether they know it or not, by the very action of participating in this counterfeit system of trust, right? And I'm going to get to that too, actually, in just a second. Hopefully I remember it. But the whole thing about trust, in God we trust, and they put it on the money just to let you know that God can't save you from this. Only knowledge can, because my people perish for a lack of knowledge, because God's hands are tied to a certain extent until judgment day, or until Christ returns, because he will not affect your free will. And so they presume you to be doing this of your own free will, and to have consented. So equity itself, so law, the way law actually looks at it, trustee of the Most High, the way law actually looks at it, like, is law, and equity is not law. If you look at Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution, or any jurist, this is Bouvier, or this is Blackstone's commentaries upon which the founders drew to create the framework for this system. This guy is brilliant when it comes to law. There's 4 of these books. It's over 1,000 pages, and it's absolutely brilliant. Like, all colonists that knew their stuff had a Holy Bible and a copy of Blackstone's commentaries. And equity is not law. Okay, equity is what is fair and equitable according to the conscience of a judge. Law is black and white. Now, what you could say is the concept of equity came from the mercy of Christ, and I would agree with that. But only Christ is in the position to be merciful or equitable and be able to adjudicate those type of things, not man. And again, this goes back to usurping the authority of Christ. So anyways, let me finish this real quick. And this should make a little bit more sense. So on the other hand, the liberty of considering all cases in an equitable light must not be indulged too far, lest thereby we destroy all law and leave the decision of every question entirely in the breast of a judge. And law without equity, though hard and disagreeable, because law is the 10 Commandments. It's Exodus 20. It's the 10 Commandments. Though hard and disagreeable, is much more desirable for the public good than equity without law, which would make every judge a legislator and introduce the most infinite confusion, as there would be almost as many different rules of actions laid down in our courts as there are differences of capacity and sentiment in the human mind. So then we'll go over here to Bouvier's Law Dictionary. Whoops, that's not what we wanted. We wanted D. Did I have D? Yeah, right here. Oh, wait, I got to leave. Hold on. Yeah, so discretion. Check this out. So we're going to go to discretion, which is up here. It should have already been on it, but apparently not. So it's right here. So discretion. Okay, so discretion. When it is said that something's left to the discretion of a judge, it signifies that he ought to decide according to the rules of equity and the nature of circumstances. Okay, cool, right? So it's up to the judge's conscience, because it's fictional stuff, right? It's fictional. It only deals with fiction. All right. The discretion of a judge is said to be the law of tyrants. It is always unknown. It is different in different men. It is casual and depends upon the constitution, temper, and passion. In the best, it is oftentimes capriciousness. In the worst, it is every vice and folly and passion to which human nature is liable. Right. So equity here, let me just try to get this. So yes, it has nothing, neither, you could be all those things, Jew, black, yellow, Prussian, green, straight, doesn't matter. You could be all those at law too. Law only deals with, did you hurt somebody or violate their free will? That's what law is. Equity, on the other hand, is generally dealing with contracts and trust relationships, whether express or implied. Okay, this is so important to understand. And just because the words found in the Old Testament, it's not referring to the law. Okay, it's referring to equity. That's why Article 3, Section 2 makes a distinction between the two. And the concept of equity being, you can be more merciful in equity because it's up to a judge's conscience, whereas the law is just black and white. So that's where people get it confused and tie it up with like it being a divine concept, which it is a divine concept only to be enacted against other living people by the divine. Right. So in order for a living person to end up in a court of equity, they either had to have knowingly entered a contract where they adopted a legal fictional persona. Right. That's pretty much it. Or adjudicating a contract, which you can adjudicate in equity instead of law because there's more leeway for the judge's interpretation to rule in your favor. But still, it's not law, and neither is the contract itself. It's private law. The only lawful aspect about the contract is you fulfilling your word and performing the obligations, and that's what makes you be able to adjudicate a contract at law. But they prefer to do it in equity. But trusts can only ever be adjudicated in equity, right? And the reason that equity appears in the Bible is because what God has granted us is a trust. That's what the whole satanic trust system counterfeits the divine trust system, where we hold we hold our bodies, our souls, and whatever we take care of in the world in trust on behalf of God. So, all right, without further ado, let's get into this. It's important to know that about equity. So they wanted to trap everyone into equity so the judge could be God. That is the simple fact of it. There's no two ways about it. So let's see here. There it is, constitutional con. So very few people know this, but this is true, and it's actually verifiable. Though I don't agree with everything he says in here, it is verifiable, and he does leave you the verifiable links, which I have verified. I've said this a million times because I've showed the actual evidence of it, but the collection of it's right here, so it's simple, concise, and I can present it to you guys. So what happened at we had the Articles of Confederation, and like I said, it was an impenetrable framework to protect our sovereignty against the states and the federal government. And that's why they had to change it, because it allowed the common people to have too much power. 60 years, I believe it was, after the Constitution was ratified, James Madison's diaries were released. And in it, he said that he was afraid of the common people gaining power and how it would affect the interests of the wealthy. And that's because the interests of the wealthy were to enslave everybody in debt, obviously, because that's where we are now. And not all of them. There were some good people. Like, for instance, I believe it was Patrick Henry, I want to say. It was either Thomas Paine or Patrick Henry. They got pissed off when the Constitution was ratified. So when the Constitution was going to be ratified, and they were talking about changing the Articles of Confederation at first, people were pissed. And I believe it was Thomas Paine. He said, "How dare you accuse the government that just saw us through a war with the greatest empire on the face of the earth of being ineffective?" Right? This government just saw us through a war with the British Empire and we won. And you're going to say that it's not good enough? Well, the truth was it was too good. And they needed their scummy little leeway for the Bar Association to be able to creep into the back door through the judicial branch, like Jefferson said, and work like gravity by night and by day to usurp the sovereignty of the people. And I know all about, gravity. It's not, I get it. So for all my FE guys, trust me, I'm just quoting Jefferson. Trustee of the Most High, thank you very much. He says, "For I am the Lord, and I change not." Amen to that. Thank you for the super chat, man. Appreciate it. So, All right. He says the first, oh, this is interesting. The first function of the founders of nations after founding itself is to devise a set of true falsehoods about origins, a mythology that will make it desirable for nationals to continue to live under common authority, and indeed make it impossible for them to entertain contrary thoughts. How true is that? The first function of the founders of nations is to create a set of falsehoods as their history, a mythology about how magical the founding of this was and how special this place is and all that stuff, right? Now, I personally do think the original framework was very special, but I think that it was set up just to be usurped, like I said, by the merchant banker enclave, because they couldn't get out from under the kings and the popes unless they created a nation where the people were sovereign and then usurped that sovereignty. It's that simple. It's that simple. So he says the two is for a fallacy. Many use claiming truth lies in duality. Many use claiming the truth lies in duality. Interesting. The truth is one. The law is one. Everything else is deception, lies, and evil doing. I agree with you. And let me see what else we have here. Trustee of the Most High going wild in the chat. He says Spanish is the closest to Latin. Portuguese was going to be close. Surety, collateral, yep. Being heart, living soul, racketeering. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. It's a good illustration. That's why they're so obsessed with the what gives them authority, right? So you've got these big giant fake dicks in the middle of the centers of power represent the phallus of Osiris. We have Roger. What's going on, brother? How you doing?
Not much. My grandson wanted to say he liked your avatar. His name is Phoenix, actually. He wanted to say hi to you right quick.
Say hi, hey, what's up, Phoenix? How you doing, buddy? Nice to meet you, man.
You hear that? He said it's nice to meet you. Is it nice to meet him? He's a little bashful now.
I get it. My daughter's the same way, man.
He's only 4.
Cool.
So.
Yeah, she's about the same.
Say hi, Ryan.
Everybody in the room saying hi to you now.
Hello, everybody.
I got all the grandkids this week. The grandmother's birthday, and she went to California to go to Universal Studios. So.
Oh, okay. That's cool. Yes, you got a house full. That's cool, man. Yeah. So what do you think of the topic?
I don't know. I haven't had too much time to listen to you. I really have got a handful. Just saw you're on. I hopped in there.
Oh, I got you.
You were going over the infancy that they try to put you under constitutional law. I got that much. But
I was going over the satanic counterfeit system that it actually is the usurpation of God's authority. Hold on.
Okay.
The usurpation of God's authority by basically, so it's interesting. They consider a mortgage an undertaking, right? Or the obligations associated with the mortgage is called an undertaking. You'll see in these financial papers all the time that they're always referring to an undertaking. Okay. Like, engaging in an undertaking. So when you go to, let's go to the free dictionary, right? And this is important to realize. Let's just click whatever farm. Oh, I had undertaker right there. So we'll do undertaking.
He was one of my favorites too back in the day. The Undertaker.
Let's see. Oh, Undertaker. Yeah. So we go to the legal definition of undertaking. Okay. This is why this is a good resource. And it says that a written promise offered as a security for the performance of a particular act required in a legal action, right? Or an undertaking with an adequate security as a bond. The term is used in a general sense, and that's why they call it a judicial mortgage. Okay, when they place you under a trust through the courts, it's a judicial mortgage. And again, that's a dead pledge because it's an undertaking, right? So you have to understand this is an ancient debt code because they can't make law to affect living people unless they consent to it. So what they do is get people to consent to debt relation or trust relationships that pull them into a legal fiction, such as a mortgage, where they're stuck in an indenture and the rents and profits of all their property are owed to the lender, and also all of their property subject to regulation and administration, which allows man, if you can place everybody in a society in that position, that's the only way man can become God and make law that affects society as a whole. That's their whole purpose. So you'll go down here, another Undertaking, contracts, an engagement by one of the parties to contract to the other, and not the mutual engagement of the parties to each other. Well, that's exactly what happened here, right? The money, it's the mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people in the nation. Okay, that was an undertaking. It was one-sided because it's a pledge, just like Edward Mendel House said. He said, we'll use, where is it at? We'll use the ancient system. He says, very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. And it is ancient, goes all the way back to ancient Egypt and then to Babylon, where they reduce people to property through pledging. That's what the citizenship of Rome is the same system, right, where they reduce them to chattel property, which can only be adjudicated in quasi-rem equity courts. And there, the judge is God, right? And so we'll go back to this free dictionary real quick, and we'll look up Undertaker, okay?
Quick question for you, though, right quick. What is the definition of biological property? How do they define that monkey? How do they do it?
That's your children. They're talking about the birth certificate. When you register your child to get a birth certificate, that's registering your biological property. And that's what they're talking about. Once you register it, which is, if you guys looked at the title of tonight's stream, right? What is it? It's like Regnatium or something, right? It's reg. The reg is important because that means government. It means governed, right? Like crown, like king, like regal, regis. Register. Okay. And so when you register something, you're literally giving it to the crown, right, in exchange for the protection of that property. But because they have a superior interest in it, the interest to protect it, they now get administrative control over it. That's why anything that's registered automatically comes under the administrative control of whomever it's being registered with. And that's why they always want you to register things, because it makes it their property.
Do it, right? Like, don't register everything. There's no need for it. Huh.
So obviously, an undertaker right here is a person whose profession is the preparation of the dead or burial or cremation, right? A person who, obviously a person who undertakes something, right? Mortician from that dictionary, one whose business is the management of funerals. So the undertaking, the mortgage, there is undertakings involved with the mortgage. That's the whole point, right? And then the mortgage itself means dead pledge. And when something is mortgaged, like your estate was here, right? When something is mortgaged, it is dead because the lender gets all the rents and profits of it until the loan is paid in full, right? During that time, the property that's mortgaged is considered dead until the debt is paid in full. You're literally dead. You're civiliter mortis. I had a court case pulled up here. I was showing it earlier on. So it shows you right here in this court case, which is called, I just picked one, Henri Robinette, right? And it doesn't really matter, because if you look up civiliter mortis in any of these court cases, it has to do with either being a bankrupt or being a felon or being sentenced to life in prison. It's somebody who is not able to assert their will at law because they're dead to the law. And that's why the judge wears the black robe. He's a priest of Osiris. He's a priest of Baal, right? He's literally a canon priest of this ancient Egyptian death cult that is acting as God and adjudicating the dead. That's why they summon you to court. They summon you into court to judge you. And then I showed this earlier, and maybe some people didn't see it because they've showed up afterwards, but you have this IRS logo, right? This is another example. So you got 13 states, one capital to start, right? The 13 pieces of Osiris, and then the center of the authority with the obelisk, right? And the vesica piscis representing the female reproductive organ, which shows the authority to govern the dead, right? The artificial authority, because that's not the original authority. That one was fashioned because the original one was fed to a crocodile. Okay, so you look at the IRS logo, and that is a grim. You see the eagle holding the scales with, for some reason, a feather in the scales, right? Well, that's the Grim Reaper or Saturn or Osiris holding scales and weighing your heart against a feather. As we were learning earlier, that's the principal function of his being the god of the underworld after Set had killed him, is is judging the dead and weighing your heart against a feather. Well, that's what the IRS is. So they're telling you in your face with symbolism that they view the whole nation as dead, and they're they're Osiris over you, weighing your debts and your actions against a feather. That's what they're doing. It's one big fucking death cult.
Yeah, I was like
your
dad made with the Messiah and the crocodile too. That was a good connection. I like that. That was a nice one.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. And it all goes back to that stuff because this is an ancient system that they've been trying to re-implement and implement over and over again. And it kept getting thwarted. Now the only way to make it actually possible was to give the people their sovereignty, take them out from under kings and the Pope, and then usurp that sovereignty for themselves as a way for them to get out from under the kings and the Pope, so that they can then set up this massive worldwide trust indenture system, which is actually on behalf of the Pope through unum sanctum, but it had to be done this way. And to be able to create one world, basically administrative government over the world of debtor trustees, dead people, right? That's the system that they've set up. So it's quite an interesting thing. So this is called the Constitutional Con. It's by a guy named Michael Sarian. He's got some good information. He's also got some bullshit information. He's kind of a gatekeeper to a certain degree, but all of this stuff in this document I read years ago, and it's all verifiable. So like, for instance, he says the U.S. Constitution was created on September 17th, 1787, and ratified behind closed doors on June 21st, 1788. Yeah, they had to ratify it behind closed doors. That's a fact, because people were pissed. 39 out of the 55 delegates attending the Philadelphia Convention signed the document. Their con job is evident from the very first line pen. Legally, the people mentioned are not sovereign beings, but willing slaves who had been granted the illusion of freedom. That happened as soon as they were able to get the Constitution put in. That's why nobody ever finds it curious that the Bill of Rights was amended to the Constitution 2 years after the Constitution was ratified. That's because this Constitution was ratified quickly, right? First of all, it was drafted behind closed doors. They had armed guards outside to make sure nobody could listen in and eavesdrop on what was being discussed, okay? And then they hurried up and pushed the ratification through all the states. And when Thomas Jefferson was gone on a diplomatic mission to Tripoli during the ratification, during the ratification, when he came back and seen what had happened, that the original framework had been replaced by this, he called it an infernal document. He said the germ of dissolution is seated within this infernal document. Okay, he said it will allow the judicial branch of government to operate like gravity by night and by day, to usurp the sovereignty of the states, which is exactly what happened with the 14th Amendment. And that wasn't lawfully ratified, but guess why it stands? Because the judicial branch, particularly the Supreme Court, upholds it, which is controlled by a foreign agent, the bar associations, which is controlled by the ends of court, which is controlled by the church. So the Catholic Church.
It sounded like they had to slip it in real quick and then get the rest of it in after the fact.
Like they did it. And so he rallied the people. Him and Thomas Paine and Patrick Henry, they all rallied the people to have a Bill of Rights amended to the Constitution. He said, if you don't have a Bill of Rights amended to this Constitution, you will be slaves. You'll fought this war for no reason. Your sons and your brothers and your fathers will have died for no reason, right? So, all right. Yeah, it's crazy. So let's see what
guilt trip, dude. Like, all your sons and fathers have died for no reason.
What do you mean? He was right. He was right.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, no, he was right, and that's all. Whoa, hold on.
Sorry, Ryan. I'm gonna get off here. They're starting to get loud. I'll be listening now.
Okay,
I'll get out.
Okay, it was good. It was good to say hi, man. Yeah. All right, later.
No problem. And you met my grandson today. He saw that you're a screensaver and you're an icon. Like, that's a phoenix. I'm a phoenix. Like,
that's very cool. It's a cool name, man. It's awesome. I appreciate it.
So so what you were saying is that guy was just pointing it out that they shouldn't have died in vain, basically. I just wanted
you missed what I said. I said the ratification was against the will of the people of the Constitution, because the original framework was already more than sufficient, and the Constitution was actually a trick And so Thomas Jefferson, they had to do it while Thomas Jefferson was away. And when he came back, he was pissed off, and he warned everybody about the danger the Constitution imposed, particularly through the judicial branch of government, allowing the Bar Association a back door in, right? So, so what he did was he said, you guys need to at least amend a Bill of Rights to this infernal document. Otherwise, you will have fought the Revolutionary War for no reason. And that's why the Bill of Rights was not included originally. They were trying not to have none of that stuff in there at all. You know what I mean? And the only reason we do even have that Bill of Rights, which is the only thing, and I agree with Winbay, like they're both bullshit, but the Bill of Rights, at least in the Second Amendment, has kept the forces of darkness at bay, at least to a certain extent, right? Because believe you me, if we didn't have arms in this country, we'd already be like Canada and Britain or England and China and everywhere else that's falling under the communist and, you know, administrative rule that they intend us to be under as well. And so that's like one, you know, glass half full type of thing. Jefferson made sure that happened, but Jefferson was also no saint either, because he's one of the ones who helped make sure that the Roman Civil Code was at least implanted in one state in the Union by buying Louisiana and the Louisiana Purchase. That Louisiana was owned by France under Napoleon and was under the Napoleonic Code, which is Roman civil law, and remained under Napoleonic Code and still is technically to this day. But everyone's under Roman civil law now, so it doesn't matter. So and yes, so like Winbay says, that's why we had a law against the titles of nobility at one time. Yeah, we had the original 13th Amendment. It was ratified in 1810, and it stayed on the books till 1830. So for 20 years, the original 13th Amendment, it's still, I have it up somewhere, I'm pretty sure, right?
So you're leaning more toward Bill of Rights than constitutional rights, is what you're saying?
No, Articles of Confederation, dude. Okay. So what I'm saying is that they did this whole thing as a trick. The Constitution, like when people say, "Oh, I'm a constitutionalist," it's ridiculous, because the Constitution was always intended to usurp our authority. That was the whole point of it. And Thomas Jefferson,
like they're selling it back to you, aren't right? Like you already have these rights naturally to speak of, but they're selling you your rights back to you in a way. Well, you're paying.
That's why they started writing down rights in the first place. But no, that's totally not. I don't think you're getting what I'm saying. It's okay. So we had the Articles of Confederation originally, okay, and it was impenetrable. It's too impenetrable. They couldn't centralize power, which they needed to do to be able to borrow from the banking system, from the central banking system, and in order to centralize all the collateral by doing something like they eventually did, the 14th Amendment, which created federal citizenship, one centralized citizenship. They needed those two things. And in order to do that, they needed to have a strong central power, which the Articles of Confederation specifically protected against. So what they did against the will of the people was they had the Constitutional Convention. At first, it was just, we're going to change the Articles of Confederation. But then they were like, nope, we're going to scrap it and just make a whole new document. And so they had armed sentries outside of the Constitutional Convention, making sure that no one could eavesdrop and listen to what was being discussed, which is shady in itself, right? And then they pushed the ratification through very quickly against the will of the people. People were protesting like crazy. And then when Thomas Jefferson came back,
did we have a Congress at the time? A representative?
Yes, you did. But they're all in. That's what I'm saying. The majority of them were in on it. So then by the time Thomas Jefferson came back, the Constitution was already pushed through. He's seen they'd replaced the original framework of government. He said that the germ of dissolution is seated within this infernal document, right? He said it will allow the judicial branch of government to work like gravity by night and by day to usurp the sovereign authority of the states. And that's what happened. So this is not the one I thought I had up. So if you guys look up the 1819 Virginia Bill of Rights, the original 13th Amendment is still in it, but I thought that's what I had pulled up. Apparently this is another Virginia statute I have pulled up.
I was waiting for you to read that out, man. I wanted to hear the full 13th Amendment.
Well, basically it says that no person who has any title of nobility or emolument or any kind of grant from a foreign power can be a citizen of the United States or hold any office of profit or trust, which is welfare offices. And they did that because they knew the Bar Association was going to try to come in and through debt create their administrative government, right? And so that 13th Amendment, that same clause was in the original Articles of Confederation. The only reason we have a Bill of Rights is because Jefferson warned the people of what the Constitution is. Okay, so
whatever
that
happened
original,
to that? He did sign it though, didn't he?
What are you talking about?
The Constitution itself. He's one of the signatures on it was Jefferson, right?
No. Okay,
No?
yeah.
No,
Now you're thinking of the Declaration of Independence.
So, yeah, I got you. Yeah.
Okay, so anyways, so the 13th Amendment was on the books from 1810 to 1830, and then mysteriously got removed, and there's never been a good reason given. They say, oh, it wasn't properly ratified or whatever, but to say that it wasn't properly ratified but it was on the books for 20 years. So to say it wasn't properly ratified is to accuse all of the brilliant jurists of that time, who are way smarter than the lawyers today, of imbecility, of just allowing this to be on the books of all the states for 20 years in their revised statutes. And it was never actually, and not a single person said, oh, you know, that wasn't lawfully ratified, right? For 20 years. No, it's because the attorneys needed that amendment to be gone. The Bar Association did, because they are esquires, okay, which is 1 degree below a knight. And it is a foreign title granted by the crown, right? And so esquires would not be able to hold. I'll show you guys something interesting, actually. Watch this. So there's this lady.
They had something to gain by getting rid of the 13th, right?
Well, yeah, they hijacked our entire government. Now they give all of their acts the veil of authority through the Supreme Court by here, check this out. So this was a bill on the floor of the House in New Hampshire, right? Of course, it was dead immediately, but it was introduced by what's her name? I'll find her name. It's probably at the bottom. It was introduced by this lady who immediately was forced to resign, but it was a bill to recognize the original 13th Amendment of the United States. And here it says, in 1810, a proposed amendment to the United States Constitution, which prohibited titles of nobility and later became known as the original 13th Amendment, was introduced and passed both houses of Congress and was sent to the states for ratification. On December 9th, 1812, shortly after ratification by Virginia, New Hampshire became the 13th state to ratify the amendment. The amendment was therefore ratified by the requisite number of states and became Article 13 of the United States Constitution. Understand, this amendment just disappeared without any real explanation for it, and they just still ignore it. They just act like it didn't happen. But this would eliminate like 99% of our government because they're mostly bar members. So which are foreign agents. During the war between the states, otherwise known as the Civil War, the country was under martial law, and all executive orders made by President Lincoln were in effect law. After the war, laws made during the period were to be abated, yet vestiges of martial law remained, and presidents continued to write executive orders. The District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871, otherwise known as the Act of 1871, created a corporation in the District of Columbia. I just made a short, if you guys want to learn about that, I just made a short explaining exactly why. It gave the District of Columbia a corporate charter, and then, of course, the Bar Association, through the Supreme Court, ruled on a couple of cases, and I'm of the opinion that they intentionally bring these disputes to the Supreme Court just so they can get a ruling. Like, they're mock disputes just so they can get the judicial justification to do some bullshit like they did here. The Supreme Court rulings allowed corporations to do business, corporations specifically, to do business across state lines and over international lines, which up until that point was not allowed. And this allowed, since DC is technically a municipal corporation via the Organic Act of 1871, now foreign money lenders, foreign investment bankers were allowed to take control as shareholders of this municipal corporation. And so it allowed the municipal corporation to be where it already was intended to be, in the hands of foreign merchant bankers. And so anyways, so called the United States of America. So the District of Columbia, and it is called the United States of America, right? It's basically doing like the United States of America is basically a business located in the District of Columbia. That's it. And then they expanded that maritime admiralty, which also assisted with them being able to spread maritime admiralty to within the states because of the international provision of those rulings and what the District of Columbia is. And so it allowed them to spread that admiralty jurisdiction to within the states until you ended up with where's this? I got this.
Let me get this straight, though. You're saying they're using Supreme Court rulings over mock cases for precedent so they can set policies and laws?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That was the best understanding you've had of what I've said. Yeah, that's exactly.
That's just wrong on so many different
Exactly
levels.
that. So look at this. It tells you right here, because of that, by 1966, right, they had cemented it in so well and put up the necessary legislative framework to affect the unification of civil and admiralty procedure. That's because they brought admiralty inland, right, which is crazy. And then it tells you right here, because everybody's locked in a trust indenture with no lawful right to their property that they could enforce at law. They also abolished the distinction between actions at law and suits in equity, which are two entirely different jurisdictions that should never, ever be able to meet because the law can never recognize fiction.
There's a lot of legal fiction out there. I'm telling you now, a lot of the laws are based on it, right?
That's what nobody has access to it. You only have equity. Your interest is determined by contract or trust arrangement. So it's dictated by regulations that allow you to use the property, and that can only be enforced in equity. It can never be enforced in law because it's all pretend, right? That's a fact. Don't believe me? Look into Bouvier, look into Blackstone, look into, just read about what equity is, right? So, all right, back to this bill. This is crazy, right? So this chick, Organic Act of 1871. So she actually put a bill on the floor of the House of New Hampshire to recognize the original 13th Amendment. And they would never let this happen because obviously the bars, like most of the government, would be gone immediately. So we got Sergeant Frog Dog. Good to see you, man. All right. So
they don't want that to happen. They got a lot of money they got invested in that. That's how they milk us for their money, was all that extra government, you might say. You see what I'm saying, right? In other words, all the stuff they built up on this, on you and your debt, they make branches of government and spending and stuff that they justify it by these things.
Okay, I'm back. Yeah, my freaking internet. Yeah, of course that would happen. They probably don't like this shit. Anyway, so
sorry.
Yeah, so the Organic Act of 1871 turned DC into a municipal corporation with a corporate charter, and corporations are beholden to their shareholders, not to the people, okay? So anyways, the act revoked prior legislation relative to the district's municipal charter and most egregiously led to the adoption of a fraudulent constitution in which the original 13th Amendment was omitted. Today, what appears to the public as the United States Constitution is not the complete document. This is a bill that was on the floor of the House of New Hampshire, by the way, put forth by a representative. So just so you guys know, if you're just tuning in, as it was never lawfully ratified or lawfully amended to remove the 13th Amendment. Instead, the document presented as the United States Constitution is merely a mission statement for the corporation unlawfully established in the Act of 1871. That's true. So the purpose of this
Did you lose them again, Ryan? Did we lose you?
prohibits titles of nobility is properly. They keep knocking my internet out.
Yeah,
is properly included in the United States. Is properly included in the United States Constitution and is the law of the land. The act also intended to end the infiltration of the Bar Association and the judicial branch into the executive and legislative branches of government, and the unlawful usurpation of the people's right guaranteed by the New Hampshire Constitution to elect county attorneys who are not members of the fucking bar. Excuse my language. I know you got your grandson there. My bad.
This is a good old boy, isn't it? If you're part of the bar, yeah.
This unlawful usurpation gives the judicial branch of government control over all government and all people in the grand juries. As long as the original 13th Amendment is concealed from the people, there shall never be justice or a legitimate constitutional form of government. Okay, just so you guys say, this is from Legiscan, right? This is from New Hampshire. This bill was introduced dead. They immediately shut this down. It was laid on the table by Representative Valancourt, right? But that wasn't the name of the one who actually drafted it. The sponsors, it was Tremblay. And now, if you look up Representative Tremblay, they fucking punished her, dude. She resigned. They smeared her in the media, like all sorts of stuff. And of course they would, right? So, okay, so this is the original 13th Amendment, so you guys can read it. It says, if any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, retain any title of nobility or honor, or shall, without the consent of Congress, accept, retain any present, pension, office, or emolument of any kind whatsoever from any emperor, king, prince, or foreign power, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States, meaning of the several states, because there was no federal citizen at that time, and shall be incapable of holding any office of trust or profit under them or either of them. And what an office of trust or profit is welfare. I can prove that too. Look, it's right here. So if you become a charge to the county, township, or state, you automatically, by operation of law, come under administration, because you cannot subsist on your own. And as Bouvier says, right, as Blackstone says right here, state of dependence will inevitably oblige the inferior to take the will of him on whom he depends as the rule of his conduct. That's common law. That's how you get moved out of common law, by dependency, right? So that dependency will automatically places you under them, right? So check this out. If you look at this document, which is right here, this is the original Pennsylvania Constitution. Section 36 says, as every free man to preserve his independence, if without a sufficient estate, meaning if you cannot live off of your property by itself, like investments or a farm or something, right? So ought to have some profession, calling, trade, or farm whereby he may honestly subsist. And if that's the case, there can be no necessity nor use in establishing offices of profit, which are welfare offices. The reason they're welfare offices, because administrative law, going all the way back to the Magna Carta and onward, from the Magna Carta onward, allows the administrator, anyone who's appointed as an administrator, to take a reasonable revenue from the estate they are managing. So this eventually evolved into the settlement acts and the poor laws, where the people who were poor would come under the church. Church has always been in charge of administrative law. They still are. That's why judges are ruled by canons. And it would allow them to take these poor people, and then these workhouses were created. And they'd literally pimp these poor people out to these workhouses, and then they'd go and work. They were issued settlement certificates, the predecessor to the modern day birth certificate, and they'd go pimp them out to these workhouses, and then they'd take from their productive value, they take reasonable, quote unquote, revenues, and then give a snippet of their own productive value back to them in the form of welfare benefits. And that was the original welfare system in the 1600s. And it's evolved into, they were still doing it in the 1800s in Michigan. And then, eventually, with the bank,
still doing it now, Ryan? I mean, with the welfare, yeah,
that's what I was just getting to. So eventually, by 1933, everyone became paupers because they took away your access to lawful money. So therefore, by default, you would be under administration anyways. But you were already under administration as a 14th Amendment Roman citizen, basically, because that's what that type of citizenship is. It's a trust created by the federal corporation, a persona for you to adopt. And they agree to give you privileges, immunities, benefits, and protection in exchange for using you as capital stock and collateral, and you can't question the debt, according to the 4th section of the 14th Amendment. So anyways, and it says right here, there can be no use in establishing offices of profit if you have a profession, calling, trade, or farm, or you can subsist on your own estate, right? Because the usual effects of offices of profit, welfare offices, are dependence and servility, because you come under administration, unbecoming of free men, okay, and the possessors and expectants of the welfare benefits, and faction, contention, corruption and disorder among the people who hold the offices of profit. So
is there any way around the 14th Amendment itself? Is there a legal way around it?
Yeah, that's what we do in the Jurist Society, man. That's what I was explaining to you last. Well, yeah, I was talking to you about it in the last meeting we had. Don't you remember?
Yeah, I kind of do to a point.
Yeah,
I've been busy, man.
Okay.
I really have.
I get it, but yeah, no, you got to claim your estate on the record. Remember, because it tells you right here, Bouvier, the word estate literally means in Latin, it's status, and your status is determined by your relationship to your property, basically. And so you have to claim it, because right now the only reason that they have you under administration is because you are under a shitload of presumptions. And one of them is that you're a 14th Amendment citizen whose estate's been mortgaged and is being held in held in trust as collateral for the public debt, and subject to revenue codes and regulation and all that bullshit. And that's why you have to have licensing and registration and all that, because it's not yours. You just have the right to use it, and you have to use it under the conditions that are dictated by the trust, that's your equitable right to it, or your privilege to the property. But you don't have ownership or lawful right to the property, ownership rights, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to see if I can find that original 13th Amendment. So people who tuned in, they might be, oh, that's just something off Legiscan, or that's some crazy representative. Okay, well, let's see if we can do this, right?
So it sounds a lot like the original drafters of the Constitution were meaning for us to be sustainable on our own properties to begin with, right?
Not all of them, no, not by any means. That's why they ended up switching out the Articles of Confederation for the Constitution, right? So this is all claims of dismissal. Is this the right one, or is it the other one? Nope. Okay, so it's the other one. I got 2 Virginia law books on here, so it's going to be one or the other, and I picked the wrong one. So hold on. But you guys will find this interesting if you've never seen it before. Whoops, Virginia. Yeah. Okay, so we want the 52 one. Okay, I should have known better. Now this is going to open up right here, and Virginia has like the best Bill of Rights too. We're going to look at that for a second. Okay, so this is Article 2. So this is the revised code of Virginia from 1819. Okay, so this is 7 years after the 13th Amendment was ratified, and this is the end of the book, the federal constitution portion of the book. And that's Article 12. Here's Article 13, the original 13th Amendment. If any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor, or shall, without the consent of Congress, accept and retain any present, pension, office, emolument of any kind whatever, from any emperor, king, prince, or foreign power, like the crown, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States and shall be incapable of holding any office of trust or profit, the welfare offices, under them or either of them. And then, yeah, so that's right there. Boom, 1819. It was in there. It's in their law book. It was ratified. This was the last state to ratify it. Where did it go? It just poof, disappeared, because the Bar Association is a bunch of slimy lizard scumbags, right, who work for the devil himself. So I'd make no mistake, if every single person listening right now does not know that the Bar Association and the Inns of Court in the old Templar Church in London, directly under the Vatican, right, are the greatest enemy to mankind that has ever existed in the history of the world, other than the devil himself. You need to know that, okay? The Bar Association is the greatest enemy to everything you hold dear. They're evil, communist, Luciferian, satanic scumbags who are attempting to usurp God's authority, okay, using trust law, which is basically the legal scheme laid out in the Legend of Osiris, where they want to be gods of the dead. They want to pull you into the legal underworld and rule over you, okay, be able to regulate you as property, as chattel property. And then they want to make it permanent with AI and digital currency. Are you going to let them do it? Or are you going to learn this stuff? Huh? What's going to happen?
I haven't bought any digital currency yet, Ryan. I don't want.
It's not even about just that. People have to know this that I'm teaching. That's why I teach it. That's why I spend this time teaching it, because it's so important. It's not as superficial. See, you've got different layers of people who are awake. And okay, and even at people who consider themselves mostly awake, where they know that all the politicians work together and that the whole world's a stage, and you know about the Federal Reserve and all that, you still don't know this lawful aspect, which is this is the real satanic conspiracy. This is the culmination of revelations. This is what they're trying to do, usurp God's authority, just like they tried to in Babylon. What do you think the Tower of Babel was? Babel, blah, 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 blah. It's legalese. And Babylon was where they reduced people to property and started to create this artificial system where the king was able to be God. Or it wasn't even a king, it was a priest class. Okay, Babylonian priest class, who were both the bankers and the priests. Okay, they minted temple coins, and they figured out that by controlling the weights and measures of the medium of exchange, they could control commerce. And by controlling the name, they could control the man and the soul. They figured this shit out a long time ago, but it kept getting struck down. It kept failing, kept failing, kept failing. It wasn't until they decided, like, okay, we're going to level the playing field. We're going to give people a level starting point, and God's hands will be tied. So what does it say on the top of the bill, or on top of a Federal Reserve note, right? Let's just look at one real quick. Why wouldn't we, right? So we'll go. We'll keep the Grim Reaper.
Marxism, because Marxism starts off like that in its original context. They wanted to equalize everybody across the board.
Marxism is perfected feudalism. Communism is perfected feudalism. It's centralized government control of property and reducing all people to property so the government can regulate property and labor, okay, and all the behavior of all the property of all the citizens as property. It's reducing people to a trustee of their own estate. It's the only way you can have communism. That's why Marx said that a central bank is imperative to instituting communism, because you have to have that third party financial institution that's private and independent to be able to mortgage the estates of the citizenry in exchange for currency or for a loan, right? In order to indenture the society as a whole. And once you indenture the society as a whole and remove their property rights, because it's all being used as collateral for the debt, then you can place the property, including the citizen itself, in trust and regulate it. And that's the only way you can have communism. Communism, it was a perfected plan of the papal bull, Unum Sanctum. Do you realize that the Catholic Church, which is actually just the ancient Egyptian, Babylonian, Roman cult, right, of Saturn, that the Roman Church is the first people to come up with the concept of communism? It's a book by this guy named Thomas More called Utopia, and the book is about the centralized and collectivist, the collectivization of rights and property. It's Utopia. It was written in the 1500s, way before Marx, right? They
Utopia was like
panned it off on the Jews. They panned it off on the Jews. What?
I was asking. Utopia was considered like heaven. Everybody wanted it. It was like the whole idea of what utopia was like heaven itself, right?
No, a utopia would be, okay, so like an ideal utopia, which is impracticable in today's society, would be where everybody contributes and shares, and you don't need property ownership because you've somehow eliminated the evil aspect of society. But that is impracticable, only works in theory, and they know that. That's why they sell people on the flowery idea of communism back when it first started coming out. But when people tried it in practice, they found it encouraged laziness and corruption on behalf of the government, laziness on behalf of the people, because why are you going to learn some skilled profession or trade when you only get as much as the next guy who doesn't do shit? And then corruption and greed amongst the people who are running the system, because they control everything. They have all the power, which power corrupts. So it is impracticable. That's what a utopia is, impracticable unless evil somehow dissipated from the earth. That's it. So, but anyways, what I was trying to show you, let's look at a dollar bill. Okay. Well, it's not even a dollar bill. Let's just look at it's actually Federal Reserve note, because a dollar is a measurement of Spanish silver. You guys will like this, because this is how they get away with their little scheme. Okay.
So they try to sell you on an impossible idea, right, Ryan? And utopian society is no way it won't work.
So on the back of they're not going to show the back of the Federal Reserve note. It's kind of stupid. It's not illustrating my plan very well. Well, let's do this then. In God we trust. Oops. In God we trust. So this is at the top of every bill, right? And by trust, okay, they mean the trust indenture created by the mortgage of your state, the undertaking, bringing you into the legal underworld and making you chattel property through debt and negotiable instruments. That trust. Now, the reason they put in God we trust is to mock you because of this particular thing right here. We're going to go to, well, I like the blue letter Bible. Okay. And we're going to go to Matthew 16:19. All right. Matthew 16:19 is right here. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, like those two keys that the Pope has, right? That's the two crossed keys on the flag. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loose in heaven. And that's because you're free will. So when that's why they say in God we trust, that's what absolves them of their moral consequence, their karmic consequence, the wrath of God, is because they presume your consent. So, hey, in God we trust, you agreed to this. So even though what we're doing is evil, immoral, and it's a counterfeit replica of God's system where man can make law and everything's material, satanic, and commercial, and you worship celebrities as stars who are all sorts of immoral, PDF file fornicating pieces of shit, right? And you worship these people and ignore actually God. Well, in God we trust. You're making this decision. You are iniquitous, right? And evil people, and we can rule over you. That's why they're mocking you, and they're telling you this is what gives contracts authority. This is why God will not interfere with your contracts, covenants, pledges, and oaths. It's also why all through the Bible you're warned not to give them ever. That's why. Right here, because once you're bound by your own free will and you put your word on it, or the sign of your nature, signature, right? The sign of your nature onto this document, this is the crux of the Babylonian black magic, the ancient Egyptian black magic. This is the crux of it, is contracts and agreements. Okay, they use contracts and agreements to build interlocking trust relationships, which build artificial structures of society that they can rule over. That's the third temple they're talking about building. The third temple they're talking about building isn't a physical structure. It is the AI control grid with the digital currency. That's their third temple. Realize it. That's what buildings are. That's what structures are. That's what architecture actually is. The physical architecture is just reflective of the architecture of society, and the way that we have all these plain draft, communist, straight line, grade, boring ass buildings and cars is reflective of the homogeneous mass of property that they're turning the unique divine creation into, so that they can govern it. They can regulate, they can make laws to regulate it, because otherwise they would not be able to regulate you. They can only regulate you to the degree that you're dependent upon them. Right?
Yeah,
So,
I'm with you.
right.
The grandson's here. I was going to ask, hey.
What? Hello? Can anybody hear me? No. I don't know if Roger cut out or if I cut out. It looks like I'm good. Give me a 5x5 in the chat if you can hear me. Somebody. Okay. Thank you, Trustee. So, Trustee of the Most High.
Plug the microphone, dude. Sorry. Can you hear me, Ryan?
He says 5x5. Yes, I can hear you, Raj.
Okay. Yeah. I was asking, have you ever looked into the ancient Babylonian documents of the earth and stuff like that? They were actually one of the first cultures to propose a spherical earth in their model.
I don't doubt it. That's my whole point. It's the same cult, and they do that, though they know damn well it's not, because They need to create a counterfeit structure. They need to create a counterfeit world. They can't rule God's creation, so they have to create a counterfeit world. And the creation of that counterfeit world starts in the minds of each and every one of the people they're trying to rule. Okay, because your world is actually just each person lives in, we all live in a similar world, but no two people see the world the same. And your perception, the way you see the world, is unique, and they need to control that and make it their perception. And so they warp your worldview on everything. Everything they do is to distance you from the actual creator, because once you become an atheist, you're content with being governed by man. Right? You think man is the highest authority. There couldn't be any higher authority. That's why communist nations notoriously destroy any kind of spiritual liberation in their societies. For instance, communist China only authorizes Chinese Communist Party approved versions of the Holy Bible that are heavily redacted and altered so as to not inspire any kind of ideas of, freedom. So
yeah, they don't want that. They don't want you to be free or even know what freedom is. I don't think there is any free societies that I can think of right now at all, anywhere on the earth. We're all in bondage to either dogma or law, either one of the two.
We technically have, if people reclaim their sovereignty, because they built an artificial and very shaky Jenga tower of a structure on top of our original system. Okay, it's a very shaky Jenga tower. And the reason being is because it's built on basically amendments that weren't actually ratified, other amendments that were unlawfully taken out. And on top of that, it all centers around the 14th Amendment. It all settles around the 14th Amendment. It centers around the 14th Amendment, right? So, and as McDonald v. State says right here, if it ever loads, is that one may be a citizen of a state and yet not a citizen of the United States. And they are two vastly different statuses, okay? Because the citizen of the state is one of we the people and is above the creature it created, okay? And is only subject to a jury of his peers or her peers. The citizen of the United States is a creature of the federal corporation, a trust that is under the administration of the federal corporation as basically a ward through the doctrine of parens patriae, which is government as daddy government, and is thereby subject to the arbitrary legislation of Congress, and also is subject to being mortgaged because they have essentially power of attorney. They have administrative control. I can prove that too real quick while we're on the subject. And right here, Fiduciary Foundations of Administrative Law, which is a law review written by, in the UCLA law review written by Evan J. Criddle. And he tells you right here, the emerging fiduciary model, which a fiduciary is a trustee that can make financial decisions, right? Which would be the banks and the various trust companies that regulate your property. In administrative law, which administrative law is the regulation of your property. It's not actually law. Administrative right here only ever has to do with trusts. Okay, so we might as well say trust law posits that the administrative agencies, well, who are they? Administrative agencies are the DMV, the IRS, the EPA, that type of shit, right? Are endowed with authority to set regulatory policy. Regulatory policy, what was that? Like the motor vehicle code set by the DMV or the secretary or whoever, right? Licensing, registration, all the different fees that come with the use of property, or say you want an addition on your house or something like that. It's regulatory policy. When Congress, so they were endowed with that authority, when Congress and the president acted jointly as proxy settlers for the sovereign people. What is a settler? A settler, I'm glad you asked. Thank you. A settler, which I don't know how that got down to sovereign, but that's quite interesting that it did. I didn't put it there.
How about a sharecropper? A settler or what?
No, dude, don't distract people like with the different words. Settler, right? So settler right here is settlement, the conveyance of an estate for the benefit of some person or persons. Okay, so when I tell you in this UCLA law review, which is right here, that Congress and the president acted jointly as proxy settlers, which means on your behalf for the sovereign people, And you read that settlement is the conveyance, which means the transfer of an estate for the benefit of some person or persons. And then you read over here that that's not that the estate, well, where we had read, there it is, that the estate is also your status in Latin because it's your personality, labor, and property. And they settled that, which means they conveyed it, right? And which is, it's this right here. It's what it means. It means it represents the money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it's backed by the credit of the nation. It represents mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people in the nation, right? Which allows them, again, we'll pop back over here, to set regulatory policy over all of your property, including you. That's how they're able to do drug laws and stuff. Tell you not to smoke marijuana. Don't do this. Don't do that. Wear your seatbelt, right? Oh, you can't do this. You can't do that in your house. And you know what I mean? You got all of it. How are they able to regulate your private property? Because you can't live in the private anymore, because a 14th Amendment citizen is public chattel under the administration of the federal corporation and subject to the arbitrary regulatory policy. That's why they don't call the public law anymore. It's not law. It's public policy. That's what they call it. And they have to call it that because they don't, there's no law anymore. It's just policy regulating property. And it's all administrative agencies, private corporate administrative agencies that are regular. And that's the only way man can make law, is by bringing you into the artificial underworld of the legally dead, the legal fiction, as a trustee and chattel property of your own estate with no access to lawful money and no lawful rights to your property because of that, because you can't buy anything. You can only purchase with negotiable instruments, and those negotiable instruments have strings attached to them because negotiable instruments are contracts with obligations that must be performed in order for them to become valuable. And these particular negotiable instruments exist in perpetuity because there is no termination date. So it's a perpetual indenture to the satanic cult of Baal, the Saturnian priests of ancient fucking Rome, of ancient Babylon, are still controlling you, and they are this close. They are a hair's breadth away from making it permanent with artificial intelligence and digital currency. And once they integrate your phone with your body, which they entirely intend to do, right? Once they integrate that smart technology into you, it's game over. You're locked into hell forever.
So
Guaranteed.
You're saying don't get a chip put in you or anything, you know?
Well, I'm saying don't, so that this claim your estate, you have to, because it starts with, everybody looks at it like it's just going to be one thing. It's not. It's multiple things that work in tandem. First, it started with the Social Security number. Okay, that was the very first piece of their, if you want to call it, beast system. Okay, the Social Security number, a number to track and trade you, right? And to attach all your property to use as collateral, so that it's an account number. So that, say, when the cop's pulling you over on the side of the road, he needs either your license plate or your driver's license, because both of those account numbers are attached to the Social Security trust account. And they need to attach that account in order to generate their own debt securities, their own commercial paper, which is still currency. It's just technically another form of foreign currency outside of the Federal Reserve note. So they need to create that attachment to that trust estate. Okay. And in order to create that attachment, the very first thing, in order to regulate your property and be able to generate revenue and be able to control you by causing you financial injury, the very first step was to create that Social Security number. Well, the very first step was to create the 14th Amendment trustee, 14th Amendment chattel, and then to mortgage it and give it an account number to represent that mortgaged account, right? The property that's held as collateral. And then the next step was to basically fully indenture you by taking us completely off the gold standard and taking away your access to lawful money, so that you can never challenge it at a court of law because you have no lawful rights to property, including yourself, right? Then the next step was to make people to fully flesh out the legal entity. right, which is the name, the birth certificate, right, the name, all caps, plus the social security number, right, plus all other account numbers that are attached to it, your driver's license number, what your employee number, all the other numbers that are attached to it ultimately compose your LEI, your legal entity identification. Now, once they have this legal fiction fully constructed and the entire system has been moved over, they abolished the distinction between civil and admiralty action, or civil and admiralty law, by bringing admiralty inland and just blending the two together, because they're really similar, pretty close to similar anyways. This Roman civil law is what the Romans used to manage their conquered possessions. And so they blended admiralty and civil law, as I showed in this document right here. No, not that one.
So is there anything as legal tender in the United States today that's actually legitimate? I'm just wondering.
So legal tender is not lawful money. Legal tender is just what Congress decides is going to be the acceptable medium of exchange. But the Constitution mandates that legal tender be lawful money, gold and silver. And that's Article 1, Section 10. So no. In fact, it's crazy. It's so crazy that gold is actually a commodity. And fucking Trump had to actually make an exception for the tariffs. Like they were going to put tariffs on gold. Like what? Like it's an import, right? And when it's actually money, it's actually money. That's insane. That's how far we've fallen from an actual real system of living men and women. And they love it. They love it, dude. They're just awful, evil pieces of shit. But anyways, so right here, they abolished the distinction between civil and admiralty, which was important. This is how they made the legal fiction all pervasive and got rid of any like actual factual aspect of society. They blended that. And then, of course, before that, they abolished the distinction between actions at law and suits in equity. And the real truth of that is they just removed your access to law because you only have equitable rights to all your property. Now, all of that had to take place as the precursor to set up this AI system. Because now that the legal entity is fully fleshed out and the people have been conditioned to living under administrative regulation for decade upon decade, and barely anybody questions it except for people like us, now they're ready to move forward and fully integrate that legal fiction into the living men and women to make them essentially permanently the artificial dead entity that they are able to regulate as property. And then once that's in, they're going to make the regulatory aspect of it artificial intelligence instead of, people. And the artificial intelligence will not distinguish between it's only ever going to see that fiction. It's only ever going to see that fiction and the account numbers. And you won't even have a chance to even challenge it because it's going to eliminate due process. As soon as you commit an infraction or violate an ordinance or a statute or any of the other pretend made up shit that man makes and tries to act like it's law, which it's not, and it only takes the color of law if you are if you consent to it, or if you're in a position where it applies to you, like part of a trust arrangement, where where part of the trusteeship is you have to obey the regulatory authorities over the property that's collateral. So you won't even be able to challenge it because as soon as you commit this infraction or this whatever, then it's also going to have direct access to your whatever bank account or whatever we're even using at this point in time. It's going to have access to your money or your digital currency, right? Your treasury dividend dollar or whatever, the asset-backed treasury, whatever. They're going to have access to your digital currency. So as soon as the alleged infraction happens, you're not even going to be able to argue that it does not apply to you because you're not under administration. You're not even going to be able to make the case that your estate's been claimed or none of that stuff, right? Say they do it without you knowing, like through smart dust or something. What's going to happen is it's just automatically going to penalize you through your bank account, and it's it, no due process. And then their system's permanently locked in and in operation and governed by artificial intelligence, and it works like clockwork. And then not to mention Palantir with its artificial intelligence kill systems that it's going to probably employ to suppress dissenters like us. right? Next thing you know, you're going to get zapped with the frequency and have some sort of incurable illness, or who knows how the hell they're going to do that. But mark my words, they're not going to want people like us talking about stuff like this when they go to implement this system. So, but you know what? Fuck them. So that's how I look at it. Anyways, with that, I've gone a little bit later than I even told my wife I would this evening. So I should probably shut it down. Do you got anything that you want to say before I get off here?
Yeah, it's very interesting how they're going to try to incorporate that. They even did all that to me last time I went to court.
Yeah,
I went
exactly.
before a video judge, and they just read my case number. Shh, I'm talking. Sorry about that. He's asking me for money. No, I went into court, and I literally just they put me in front of a video screen. They read my case number. They didn't even hear me out at all. I just acknowledged the judge, and they put me in jail right after that. Right in. And I didn't have much of a case or anything. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's right. But this is what I always say. At least right now, when you're dealing with judges that are not AI, you just don't let them acquire jurisdiction. That's your very first chess move. As they say, state your name for the record. You know, you can say something. All right, I'll check it out, Corbett, in Telegram. But anyways, you basically say, state your name for the record, and say, you could say, what makes you presume that I have one, right? Like, why do I have to have a name? Because they want the name. They control the name. That's the Roman civil law thing. They control the name. That's what they need. And so, or you can say that you can use your common law name, right? And you can be like, I'm so-and-so of the house of so-and-so, and I come before the court having been found to be living, and I'm the sole heir and executor of the res defendant, or you can add the whole thing, res defendant estate, in this quasi in rem proceeding. And I'm here by special appearance to settle the confusion, or to dissolve the confusion, because you must presume this property to be under administration, but it's been claimed, right? And then you'd be like, oh, well, so are you so-and-so, or are you not so-and-so? I said, you can be like, listen, I am so-and-so of the house of such and such. That is the first, middle, and last estate, right? That you presume to be under administration. We're entirely separate, right? And then you start in with asking questions. What is the nature and cause of the charges against me? Is this a court of law or equity? That's my favorite. Is this a court of law or equity? Okay. And then they say, well, it's a court of law. I'd be, oh, it's law. So where's the victim? Where's the signed sworn affidavit that alleges I injured somebody? Where's the witness and where's the victim? Well, you didn't have a license plate on your car. Well, then that can't even be adjudicated at law. What are you talking about? I know the law. You can't adjudicate that case at law. So this must be a court case. This must be a case of equity. Okay. Where's the contract or the trust, the trust instrument that places me in a position to have to convey the right of my property to the state to be used as collateral for the debt of a foreign corporation? Because you can't just force me to do that. That's called slavery. So where's that at? And and that's how you deal with them. You put giant pain in their asses until they don't want to deal with you anymore, because you know what they're doing. You know what they're doing. So anyway, apparently we lost Raj. I don't know. He must have disconnected or something, but that's cool. As far as you guys are concerned, let me look at some of your comments in the chat and see what we've got here. Walking Axel says, was it China or Japan with the city USA? So the products would be made in USA. I'm pretty sure it's Japan, but it's not. Yeah, I don't know. The jury's out on whether or not they were actually doing that. Some people say that's just like a joke, just like a spoof or whatever. And then some people are adamant it happened, but it would be pronounced USA. And from what I did research about it, it predates like anything that we've had going on here with trade with them. Like, it's an older city. So I think it's coincidental in my opinion. And Corbett said, if you are arrested, is that made up of the words our estate? I'm not really sure what that means. Oh, arrested. Got you. Arrested. Well, I think arrested would be more like put to rest. again, another illusion of undertaking and death, probably. But I've actually never thought about that aspect of it. I know, like, so you think like pole ice rest is sort of like a freezing aspect to it, maybe, you know. But yeah, I haven't actually found conclusive. But I would always assume that it ties to death, you know, and it would make sense with the ice and the rest and the freezing and, you know, all of that stuff, the terms that they use, because generally in like refrigeration, in the refrigeration industry, a lot of the stuff is called like mortex or mortus, or, you know, cold, alluding to dead or lifeless, because that's generally what cold is. And so I think it all is a subtle nod to the underworld system they're creating here. All right, let's see. We've got look at a couple more here. Title 18, 241, 242. Yeah, land patent doesn't allow them to own land. Well, no, and also Wisconsin Constitution, Article 1, Section 14 says that all lands are allodial and feudal tenures are prohibited. And I believe it's Article 4, Section 2, basically says what's good for one state's good for all states, and so all land is allodial anyways. And that's how it would be under common law anyways, because when we started this country, we didn't create a new government. We merely kept using common law, but we stopped being subjects and we became sovereigns, as Chisholm v. Georgia evidenced. You know, at the revolution, the sovereignty devolved on the people, and they are truly the sovereigns of this country. But they are sovereigns without subjects, with none to govern but themselves, and they are co-tenants in sovereignty. So, and the government's beneath us. So, yeah, but yeah, the government, the dead thing, which is also part of common law that we inherited through the statutes of Mortmain, can only hold land in trust because of the statutes of Mortmain. That is integrated into the law. The dead things cannot actually own anything. They can only hold it in trust, right? And so what happened when someone died intestate, or however the state or any government entity got its hands on land, they held it in trust for a limited time until it could be auctioned back off to the people, and that was essential. You know, it had to go back out into the hands of living people. So the old deal, SSN, yeah, it's true. The New Deal, insurance. Well, that's another thing. Insurance is a big scam to be able to regulate your property, right? So, because insurance, when something's insured, it takes on a significant portion of liability regarding the property that's insured, which gives it the equitable right to be able to regulate that property, and gives it pretty much a superior interest. If you want to keep the insurance, you're going to abide by the regulations the insurance stipulates. Well, they take out insurance too on their security scheme. And the insurance companies ultimately are in charge of this whole system. Insurance companies actually predate the banks. Before there were banks, there were insurance companies handing out bottomry bonds for ships and vessels for international trade, going all the way back to ancient times. Insurance companies are the predecessors to the banks, and they're the real culprits. When you look at companies like Liberty Mutual Insurance, that's just a way of poking fun at you. And it's a Liberty's Mutual, you know what I mean? Like, but anyway, yeah, Sergeant Frog Dog says he has his MCO. That's badass. It's excellent. I'm working on the land patent now. So I know that you have to get a abstract, because at some point, I can help you with this a little bit, Sergeant Frog Dog, that at some point the Torrens registry system was introduced, and that's how they ended up getting all the land locked up in trust. So the Torrens registry system. So you get an abstract done, you trace the land back to when it was entered into the registry system, and the specifications in the act that allowed them to register the land said that it had to be done through adjudication. I'll do a show on that, actually. So it had to be done through adjudication. So if they didn't do it through a court case, then it's automatically null and void. But still, even still, because feudal tenures are prohibited, it's null and void. So I imagine, as a living man, you just claim it on the record and give everyone the opportunity to state a superior claim. Being dead entities, or entities that cannot hold title to anything, they won't be able to challenge you. All right.
Oh, sorry about that,
Yeah.
Ryan. My youngin unplugged the modem there right in the middle of it.
Oh, it's all good.
Yeah, I got it hooked up to the switch by the door. He's over flipping all the switches like right in the middle. Like ding. All right. Yeah.
It's all
Makes me
good,
wanna
dude.
move it.
I've had stuff like that happen. I told my daughter to hand me some water and she chucked it right at my laptop one time. Luckily I caught it. I'm like, why would you throw that at my computer? It doesn't make sense. So we've got a new member of the Jurist Society, FE Nation. That is excellent, man. We are working on private express trusts right now. So it's a good time to get in, and we will be meeting again. And for you, Roger, I'm sure you know, but Thursday, I know you work during the day. We'll be meeting again Thursday at 5 and Saturday after 9. So we usually do Saturday, Sunday, Thursday.
I'm off on Thursday, so that makes it easy.
Yeah. Fantastic. That's perfect. So Thursday at 5 Eastern. Let me specify Eastern. So hopefully that works for you. But if it doesn't, we meet again on Saturday night at 9 after 9. So that should you should at least be able to catch one or two. And I see you super chatted me. Thank you, Roger. I appreciate it. And it's no problem being patient, dude. I get with kids, man. It's just, what can you do, right? So, but anyways, now I really am. Wait, what?
I got one here with the cell phone playing YouTube right now as loud as he can.
That's awesome.
Technology and kids. I know. You should see some of the stuff they put on there, though, dude. I swear. Their shorts for kids are not for kids at all.
No, I know all about it. So Peg's Place says they sold off the land title office in Australia. Well, the funny thing is the Torrens registry system actually started in Australia. So the guy, his name was like Alfred Torrens, and he was Australian. And of course, the bar pirates liked so much what he did over there. Well, registry is ancient, and that's how they always acquire property. But they liked the way he did it, and so they brought it over here to the States. And at the States adopt the Torrens registry system as well. And the lawyers are like, oh, it'll be easier. Instead of having to trace back all the prior owners to the land patent, which is common law and actual allodial ownership is deeds of, as land deeds tracing back to the land patent. They're like, we only have to deal with just the former owner because they don't actually own it. They're just tenants, because it turns the municipality or the county into a feudal lord, because again, they get administrative control of the property, and that's how they could charge property taxes. So is Eric Dubé and brother? I mean, I don't know. So Dave Murphy, is he making a good movie or is he sketchy? Dave Murphy, I'm not sure I know who that is. You know who that is, Raj?
Yeah, he's one of the original flat earthers. He's kind of fringe, though, when it comes to like something about drinking something in particular. You've heard of it? Sorry,
I'll look into him. I'll look into him, Trusty, and Trusty of the Most High. I don't like calling you Trusty. I got to do the whole name, or I've got to do like TTMH or something. I don't know, but Trusty is only a trustee of the Most High. So Eric Dubé, as far as he's concerned, he's got a lot of good information, but he's also, I think he's part of the controlled op of the FE to lead people away from the Bible and God. That's why he gives a lot of good information, but then goes into a bunch of Luciferian garbage too at the same time. So that's just my opinion, though. I don't really know. I don't watch a lot of his stuff, but what I have seen, that's the impression I get of him. So yeah. Anyway, let's see. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to get off here because I hear my wife turning in the bedroom, and she's probably like, why isn't this guy in bed yet? So I will see you guys I'm probably going to take, it was tomorrow, Wednesday. I'll probably take tomorrow off, and I'll see you guys probably Thursday night after our Jurist Society meeting. We'll get back into that constitutional con, and we'll break that down, how that was a plot to, do what they've done. So you guys have an excellent evening. I'll look into that Dave Murphy guy. And Raj, thanks for coming up with me.
No problem. No problem at all. You'll find Dave interesting. I'll give you that much.
Yeah, I'll look him up tonight, and I'll form an opinion. I'll let you know next time that I stream. Trusty of the Most High, if you're in the chat, I'll let you know. So you guys have an excellent night. I'll see you soon. Good night, Raj.
Night, Ryan. Night, everybody else in the chat.